10-year-old sold Dad's Harley for Mom's meds. Hours later, 200 Hell's Angels roared. The garage door was half open when the first roar hit the street, deep rolling thunder that didn't belong in a quiet neighborhood. A 10-year-old boy stood frozen in the driveway with grease on his palms and a crumpled envelope of cash in his pocket, watching the shadows of motorcycles stretch across the pavement like a coming storm. My name is Liam Carter, and that morning I sold my dad's Harley. Not because I wanted to, because my mom's pill bottle had 2 tablets left, and the pharmacist said, "We can't front it again." Because the hospital said, "Bring her in if she can't breathe," like that was a normal thing to say to a kid. Dad was gone. On a run, that's what he called it, 3 days, phoned straight to voicemail. When Dad disappeared, the house got quieter in a way that made every small sound feel loud. Mom coughing behind her bedroom door, my little sister Emma sniffing into her sleeve. The Harley sat in the garage under a tarp. Black paint, silver engine, a skull sticker Dad swore meant luck. He told me, "This bike is how we keep moving, Lee. Never let it go." But Mom needed meds to keep moving too. I tried the pharmacy anyway, pedaling there like speed could fix everything. Mr. Delgado didn't even look surprised when he saw me alone. "It's $462, he said softly. I had $12. On the ride home, my eyes blurred, but I didn't let myself cry. I turned onto Oak Ridge Lane, and the thought landed in my head like a rock. People buy things they don't need all the time. I found Dad's old flip phone in the junk drawer and typed the only message I could. For sale. Harley. Cash. Today. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from, because what happened next still doesn't feel real, and I want to know how far this story is traveling. The first call came 20 minutes later. "Bike still available?" a man asked, voice rough like gravel. "Yes," I said. "Title?" "I have papers," I lied. "Be there in an hour," he said, and hung up. I tore through Dad's desk like a raccoon in a trash can. Bills, receipts, tool manuals. Under a stack, I found a small metal box. The key was taped under the drawer, like Dad expected trouble. Inside, the title, Dad's name, and a second sheet with a winged skull logo in red letters that made my stomach drop. Hell's Angels. Dad always said he rode with friends. He never said that. Mom coughed again, wet, rattling. Emma started crying. Fear turned into something harder. If Dad was mixed up with bad people, he should have been here. He wasn't. So I did what I had to do. I pushed the Harley out of the garage because I couldn't start it without waking Mom. The tires whispered over the driveway. I parked it at the curb under the maple tree where neighbors could see, where I felt safer. Exactly an hour later, a silver pickup rolled up slow. 2 men got out, boots, faded jeans. One wore sunglasses even though the sun was weak. They circled the bike like they were shopping for meat. Sunglasses took the title from my hand and scanned it. "This says Daniel Carter." "That's my dad." He tapped the bottom corner. "Lean." I didn't know what that meant, but the way he said it made my throat tighten. "You can't sell a bike with a lien," he said. "Someone's got a claim." "I just need money," I said. "My mom is sick." He stared at me for a long second, then nodded once like he'd made a decision. "How much?" "800. The other man laughed. "800? Cute." Sunglasses leaned closer. "We'll take it. 200. "No," I said, and it came out sharper than I expected. "I need 462, at least." The laugh died. Sunglasses' voice went cold. "If you call cops, your old man won't like what happens when he gets back." "He's not answering," I whispered. "Then don't make it worse," he said, and pulled a folded paper from his pocket like he'd brought it ready. I couldn't read half the words. My hand shook so hard the pen scratched. Behind me, inside the house, Mom's coughing fit started again. Emma's crying got louder. The sound split me open. I signed. Sunglasses counted bills into my palm. 462. He didn't smile. Beard climbed onto the Harley like it belonged to him. He fired it up, and the engine exploded so loud the whole street turned their heads. Mom's curtains twitched. I stood there with the cash burning my skin as he revved once, like a laugh, then rolled away. The pickup followed, slow, like an escort. I ran inside, shoved the money into my backpack, grabbed Emma's hand and hauled her toward the door. Mom tried to stand when she saw us. "Liam, what are you doing?" Getting your medicine, I said. Please sit. At the pharmacy, Mr. Delgado's face tightened when he saw the bills. Liam. Please, I said. He rang it up and handed me the bag like it was nothing, like it wasn't my whole life in plastic. By the time we got home, Mom had taken the first dose and was breathing a little easier. Emma sat on the couch clutching her rabbit, staring at cartoons without laughing. I should have felt relief. Instead, the air in the house felt wrong, like static before lightning, because Dad still hadn't called, and because on the kitchen counter, under the mail, there was a note I hadn't seen that morning. One line in Dad's handwriting, pressed hard enough to tear the paper. Don't touch the bike. Ever. My chest turned to ice. Outside, far away at first, a low rumble rolled through the neighborhood. Not one engine. Many. I stepped onto the porch. At the end of Oak Ridge Lane, headlights appeared in a long line, handlebars rising and falling like a metal tide. The sound grew fast, multiplying, swallowing the quiet. And then I saw the vests, winged skulls, red letters. My mouth went numb as the first rider turned onto our street, and behind him came another and another, like the world had decided to bring a war to my front yard. 200 motorcycles roaring straight toward our house. My mind raced back to the pickup rolling away, slow, like they wanted me to watch. Right turn at the stop sign, the way the exhaust rattled like loose chain, a faded bumper sticker shaped like a coiled snake. And something else, a sharp chemical smell, like bleach, that stuck in my nose when they leaned close, like they'd come from somewhere that cleaned floors with industrial strength stuff. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat kept closing. The lead bikes didn't pass through. They slowed and spread out, taking the street in a neat practiced fan, blocking both ends like someone had planned it. Neighbors who'd stepped onto porches vanished back inside. The first rider stopped at our driveway. Old bike, loud pipes, leather vest with the same winged skull I'd seen on that paper. He swung off and looked up at me like he'd already decided I mattered. "Daniel Carter live here?" he called. "He's not home," I managed. "How old are you?" 10. His eyes flicked to the curb, empty now, and came back sharper. "Where's Daniel's Harley, kid?" My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Inside, Mom's weak voice floated from the living room. "Liam, who's outside?" Emma peeked around the corner, clutching her rabbit. I sold it," I said. The street seemed to tighten around the words. A big, bald man a few steps behind the rider cut his engine and walked closer. "You did what?" "I needed money," I said, voice cracking. "My mom's sick. I bought her medicine." The lead rider studied my face for a long beat. No shouting, no drama, just calculation. "Who bought it?" he asked. "I don't know their names. Pickup truck. One had sunglasses, one had a beard. They said there was a lien." That word made the rider's jaw flex. He reached into his vest, pulled out a phone, and turned it toward me. A photo filled the screen. Silver pickup, same shape, same dent above the wheel well. Next to it, the bearded man grinning with one hand on the Harley's handlebar. My stomach dropped. "That's them." "Good," the rider said, calm as ice, "because those weren't buyers." "What were they?" I whispered. "Thieves," the bald man said. The lead rider's gaze stayed locked on mine. "They stole from your father," he said, "and from us." The word us hit like a brick. I swallowed hard. "Is my dad in trouble?" He didn't answer. He just stepped onto the first porch step, close enough that I could smell gasoline and leather. "You're going to tell me everything," he said quietly. "Every word they said, every direction they drove, anything you noticed, stickers, plates, sounds, and you're going to do it now." Behind me, the front door creaked open. Mom stood there, pale but upright, eyes wide as she took in the wall of motorcycles. "Liam," she said, voice trembling, "what did you do?" The rider didn't look at her. He only looked at me. "Start talking," he said. The man on the porch step didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The whole street was listening through walls. I forced air into my lungs like I'd forgotten how to breathe. "They came in a silver pickup," I said. "Not new. There's a dent above the back wheel. The guy with the beard smelled like bleach or pool stuff." The bald man's eyes narrowed. "Chop shop smell." "I don't know what that means," I said. "It means they've been cleaning something. the lead writer replied, still watching me like I was a witness on a stand. Plates? I didn't look. He didn't get mad. He just nodded once like that was what he expected from a kid. What did they say? He asked. Exact words. They asked if the bike was still available, I said. They asked about the title. I gave it to them. They said, Lion. I said I needed money for my mom's medicine. The sunglasses guy said if I called the cops, my dad wouldn't like what happens when he gets back. Mom made a sound behind me, half cough, half gasp. Oh my God. The bald man took a step closer to the porch rail, eyes flicking past me into the house. He was huge. Not movie huge, real huge, the kind that made door frames look small. Your mother sick? He asked. Mom straightened like she could will color into her face. She has a condition. Liam did what he thought he had to do. The lead writer finally looked at her. It wasn't cruel. It was flat. Ma'am, your husband's missing. The words punched the air out of the porch. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. What? He was supposed to check in, the lead writer said. He didn't. I stared at him. That's why you're here. That's one reason, the bald man said. The lead writer's voice stayed calm. Your boy sold that Harley. That Harley had something on it that never should have left Daniel's hands. I didn't understand, but my skin started prickling all over like I was standing too close to a power line. Something like what? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he leaned a little closer to me. When they left, which way did they go? I closed my eyes and saw it again. The beard guy revving the engine like he was laughing, the pickup rolling behind like a shadow. They went right at the stop sign, I said, toward the highway. What else? He asked. I opened my eyes. There was a sticker on the pickup, a snake, like a coiled snake, not a real one, like a logo. The bald man's head turned a fraction toward another rider down the driveway, like that single detail was a key. The rider nodded and pulled out his phone, already texting. And the beard guy, I said, because my brain was latching onto anything that might matter. He had a cut on his knuckle, like he'd been working on something sharp. The lead writer's gaze sharpened. Good, he said again, and this time it wasn't reassurance. It was decision. Behind him, motorcycles idled in a disciplined rumble. No one was laughing, no one was joking. They weren't a random pack. They were a machine that had rolled in and locked onto a target. Mom took a step forward, voice shaking now that the shock was wearing off. I need my husband, she said, and my children. The bald man looked down at her like she was small enough to pick up and move. We're not here for you, he said. The lead rider lifted a hand slightly, a signal, and the bald man stopped talking. Ma'am, the lead rider said, you want Daniel back alive? Yes, Mom whispered. Then we do this clean, he said. No cops, no neighbors, no talking. At the word cops, something across the street moved. Curtain twitch, then a face vanished. Someone had already started dialing. I could feel it. Mom's eyes went hard. You can't just come here and threaten a child. I'm not threatening him, the lead writer said, and his calm made it worse. I'm telling you what this is. Those men used your son. They took a bike they knew he'd hand over. They wanted Daniel to come home to an empty garage. My stomach folded. So they knew me? They knew the house, the bald man muttered. Knew you'd be desperate. The lead writer looked back at me. You are going to help fix this. I flinched. How? You're coming with us, he said. Mom snapped, stepping forward so fast she swayed. No, absolutely not. The lead writer didn't move. If he stays here, he's a loose end. To them, not to us. The words chilled the porch. Mom's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I looked at her, then at Emma peeking from behind the hallway wall, rabbit clutched to her chest, eyes huge and wet. Mom, no, Mom said again, voice breaking, and she grabbed my shoulder like she could anchor me to the porch boards. He's 10. The lead writer held her gaze. Then keep him alive, he said quietly. Because if those thieves think he can identify them, they'll come back. Maybe not today, but they will. And your husband is already in their hands. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Is my dad alive? I asked. A pause, half a beat too long. The lead writer's jaw tightened. We're going to make sure he is, he said. That was the closest thing to an answer. One of the riders near the mailbox lifted a hand and pointed down the street. A sedan had slowed at the corner, then stopped, engine running. The driver didn't get out, just sat there watching. The lead rider turned his head slightly. "Bishop," he called. A different man stepped forward, leaner, older, with gray in his beard and a face that looked carved from road miles. "Yeah. Go talk to that car," the lead rider said, voice casual like he was asking for a lighter. "Make sure they keep driving." Bishop walked off the driveway, boots steady, hands relaxed at his sides. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. The sedan's driver made a decision before Bishop even reached the curb. Reverse lights flashed, tires chirped, and the car backed up and disappeared around the corner. Mom saw it and went pale. "You're intimidating the neighborhood." "We're controlling the scene," the lead rider corrected. "There's a difference." He looked back at me. "Kid, what did the sunglasses man sound like? Accent? Anything?" Not local," I said, because I remembered how the words dragged like he chewed them. Like he was trying to sound local, but wasn't. The bald man exhaled through his nose. "Travelers." Another rider came up the driveway and spoke low into the lead rider's ear. I caught only fragments. "Snake logo, seen it? Warehouse side, bleach smell." The lead rider nodded once. Then he turned to Mom. "We'll bring him back," he said, as if Liam was a package he'd borrowed. Mom's eyes flashed with something fierce. "If you hurt him—" "We won't," the lead rider said. "But you have to do what I tell you." Mom's breath trembled. She looked at me like she was memorizing my face, like if she blinked I'd vanish. "Liam, you stay with me." I wanted to. I wanted to be on the couch next to Emma with cartoons on, pretending the world was normal. But Dad's note was still on the counter in my mind. "Don't touch the bike, ever," and those words the lead rider had said, "Your husband is missing." I swallowed. "Mom," I said, and my voice sounded older than I felt. "If Dad's out there, I can help." I remember things. Mom's eyes filled. "You're a child." "I'm his child," I whispered, "and I already did it." The lead rider stepped back off the porch, giving Mom the illusion of space. "5 minutes," he said. "Pack the kid a coat, shoes, whatever he needs. No phones, no calling anyone." Mom clenched her jaw. "If I don't call anyone and you don't come back—" "You won't have to wonder," he said, and the way he said it made my stomach twist. "You'll hear us." He turned and walked down the driveway. The bald man lingered at the foot of the steps, watching like a guard dog. "Hurry," he said, not unkindly, just firmly. Inside, Mom moved like her body wasn't keeping up with her brain. She grabbed my jacket, shoved a bottle of water into my backpack, then stopped, hands trembling, as if she realized she was really doing it. "I don't have anyone," she whispered. "Daniel's family won't talk to us. My sister—" "Mom," I said, and my throat burned. "I'll be back." Emma grabbed my sleeve hard. "Don't go," she cried. I knelt and hugged her tight. "Stay with Mom," I whispered into her hair. "Be brave, okay?" Emma shook her head so fast her rabbit flopped. "It's your fault," she sobbed, and then she looked scared that she'd said it. I didn't get to answer. The bald man cleared his throat from the doorway, a reminder that time was gone. Mom pulled me into one last hug, crushing, desperate. "Listen to me," she said into my ear. "Don't be brave, be smart. Do what you have to do to come home." "I will," I whispered, and I meant it so hard it hurt. Outside, the lead rider stood beside a big touring bike, black and heavy. He nodded at me as if we had an agreement. "Helmet," he said. Someone handed one to me. It smelled like leather and someone else's sweat and the faint bite of smoke. My hands shook as I strapped it on. The lead rider swung a leg over the bike, then patted the seat behind him. "Hold on," he said. I climbed up, my legs barely reaching around his waist. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. The bald man mounted another bike beside us. He glanced over. "Name's Roach," he said, like introductions made this normal. "I'm Liam," I said, and my voice sounded small under the helmet. Roach grunted. "Yeah, we know." The lead rider turned his head slightly. "I'm Jax," he said. "You do what I say, you'll be fine." Jax. Then he looked toward the street and lifted 2 fingers. Engines rose as one, a coordinated swell that made the porch vibrate under Mom's feet. I glanced back and saw her standing in the doorway, one hand braced on the frame, the other pressed to her chest. Emma clung to her leg. Jax eased the bike forward. The line began to move, slow at first, then rolling. the pack forming around us like a moving wall. We didn't roar out like a parade, we moved like a unit on a job. As we reached the stop sign, Jack slowed and tilted his head. "Right," he said into the wind. "Right," I confirmed. We turned, and the street I'd grown up on disappeared behind a sea of leather and chrome. The world blurred into cold air and noise, but my brain stayed sharp, scanning for anything familiar. Every sign, every building, every turn. I forced myself to remember what the thieves had done, because now it felt like my job to see what adults missed. A rider pulled up on Jax's left, close enough that I could see his eyes behind sunglasses. He leaned in and spoke loud over the engines. "Kid," he said. "Pickup had anything hanging from the mirror? Beads? Air freshener?" I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing the cab. "Yes," I shouted back, "a yellow air freshener, pine tree." The rider nodded once, peeled away, and sped up the line. We hit the main road, then the highway ramp. Cars got out of the way like they sensed something predatory in the pack. My stomach dipped as we accelerated. I tightened my grip, pressing my cheek against the back of Jax's vest. The patch on it, winged skull, red letters, was stitched thick, raised like it had weight. I didn't know why Dad had ever gotten close to this world, but I was inside it now. 10 minutes later, we exited near a strip of gas stations and diners. Jack slowed, and the pack flowed into the lot in a controlled sweep, blocking entrances without chaos. A few customers stared. One man froze mid-sip, coffee spilling onto his hand. Jax parked beside the air pump. He cut the engine, and the sudden quiet felt wrong, like the world was holding its breath. Roach rolled up and killed his bike, too. "We got eyes," he said to Jax. "Camera at the intersection, owner's friend of a friend." Jax nodded, then turned to me. "You're going to walk with me," he said. "You're going to look at the road. Any tire marks, any trash, anything you remember." I swung off the bike, legs shaky. The ground felt too solid after the vibration. As we walked past the front windows, I caught my reflection. Small kid in a too big helmet, surrounded by men who looked like a storm. I barely recognized myself. Inside the station, the clerk's eyes went wide. Then he glanced toward the back like he wanted to run. Jack stepped up calmly, hands open. "We're not here for you," he said, same line as before. "We need your camera footage from today, around noon." The clerk swallowed. We don't give that out." Roach leaned in slightly, just enough to cast a shadow over the counter. "You can," he said. The clerk's hands shook as he reached under the counter and pulled out a tablet. It's linked to the system. I can scrub back." Jack slid the tablet closer to me. "You're the one who saw them," he said. "Tell me when you see the pickup." My throat tightened. The screen showed the lot from a high angle, timestamp ticking, people moving like ants, cars coming and going. Then, silver pickup. My finger jabbed the screen. There! The pickup rolled in, slow, like it owned the place. Beard got out, walked inside. Sunglasses stayed in the cab, head turning like he was checking angles. Jax's voice went low. "Zoom," he told the clerk. The clerk pinched the screen. The image sharpened, enough to catch the back bumper, the coiled snake sticker. And then my stomach flipped, because behind the pickup for half a second was the Harley. Dad's Harley. It was strapped in the bed like cargo, not ridden, like it was already dead. I felt a sharp sting behind my eyes. He didn't even ride it, I whispered. Roach's mouth curled. Because they had a destination. On the footage, Beard came back out holding a coffee. He spoke to Sunglasses through the window. Then he pointed toward the road that led into the industrial district by the river. Jax watched without blinking. "There," he said, tapping the direction. "That's where the bleach smell comes from." He looked at me. "You said they turned right toward the highway. This confirms the route." My hands clenched into fists. "Can we go now?" I asked, and I surprised myself with how angry it sounded. Jack studied me for a beat, then nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "We go now." He took the tablet from the clerk, paused, then handed it back. "You didn't see us," he said softly. The clerk nodded fast, pale. Outside, Jack swung back onto the bike. I climbed behind him again, gripping tighter than before, not from fear this time, but from the sudden need to do something to fix what I'd broken. Jax raised 2 fingers again. Engines woke up. The pack tightened. As we rolled out of the gas station lot, Roach pulled alongside and leaned close enough for me to hear over the roar. "Kid," he shouted, "if you remember anything else, anything, you say it the second it hits you." I nodded hard. Ahead, the River District smokestacks cut the sky like teeth, and the road leading to it looked darker than it should have at midday. We accelerated toward it, 200 bikes swallowing the lane, and for the first time since I'd posted that stupid "for sale" message, I felt a single clear thought cut through the noise. They didn't just steal a Harley. They stole the thing that was keeping my dad alive. The closer we got to the River District, the less the world looked like home. Houses thinned into old storefronts, then into chain-link lots and cracked sidewalks. The air changed too. Oil, damp concrete, and something sharp-like cleaner that didn't belong outdoors. Jax kept the pack tight but not chaotic. 2 by 2, then 4 wide when the road opened, taking space like water takes a channel. Cars drifted aside without honking. People stared from bus stops like they were watching an animal cross the street. I tried to be useful. I kept replaying the pickup in my mind, the way Beard pointed, the angle of his hand. I watched every side street for that coiled snake sticker, every loading dock for a silver flash. We crossed the bridge over the river, and the industrial district rose on the other side. Warehouses, smokestacks, faded company logos, and big blank buildings that could hide anything inside them. Roach came up on our left again, his bike steady as a train. "We got a possible," he shouted, chin lifting toward a stretch of road that ran behind a line of shipping containers. I looked where he pointed and my stomach tightened. A silver pickup sat half-hidden between 2 parked semis. Same body shape, same dull shine. From this far, I couldn't see the dent. Jax slowed, and the entire convoy slowed with him like one organism. Engines dropped from thunder to a controlled rumble. The sound still shook the air, but it wasn't wild. It was purposeful. Jax didn't go straight at the pickup. He angled off, steering into a service road that ran parallel to the containers, using them as cover. The pack split cleanly into smaller groups, each peeling off at a signal I didn't understand. It was like watching people who'd practiced this 100 times. We rolled behind a row of dumpsters and stopped. The quiet after that much noise felt like being underwater. Jax cut his engine and swung off. I followed, my legs wobbly again. He kept a hand near my shoulder without grabbing me. "Stay next to me," he said. "If I tell you to move, you move. No questions." I nodded so hard my helmet shifted. Roach rolled in and killed his bike. 2 other men joined him, one with a shaved head and a thin scar running from his ear to his jaw, another with eyes so light they looked pale. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't need to. Roach pointed toward the pickup through a gap between containers. Could be ours, could be someone else. We confirm before we do anything loud. Jax glanced down at me. Dent above the back wheel. Snake sticker, yellow air freshener. You see those, you say it. "Okay," I whispered. We moved on foot, staying in the shadows of the containers, boots crunching on gravel. My heart beat so hard it made my ribs ache. Every sound felt like it would give us away, even though we were a small army. At the gap, Jax leaned out just enough to look, then pulled back. "Kid," he murmured, "look." I leaned carefully, just a little, like I was peeking at a bad movie I didn't want to see. The pickup's rear wheel was visible. The metal above it had a dent, exactly like I remembered, a shallow crater that caught the light. My mouth went dry. That's them. Jax didn't react like a normal person would. No surprise, no anger. Just a small tightening around his eyes, as if a piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Roach exhaled. "All right," he muttered. "We got our snake." Jax looked at the Scarjaw guy. "Lock the exits. Quiet." Scarjaw nodded and vanished around the container row, moving with a predator's patience. Jax crouched beside me. "You're going to see things," he said low. "You keep your eyes open, but you keep your mouth shut unless I ask. Understand?" I swallowed. "Yes." "Good," he said, and stood. We moved again, closer. I could smell the bleach cleaner bite now, strong and wrong. The pickup sat with its driver door cracked like someone had just stepped out. A soft clank echoed from somewhere behind it, metal on metal. Jack signaled with his fingers. Roach and the others fanned out, forming a half circle without speaking. My palms sweated inside the helmet pads. We reached the edge of the container row, and Jack stepped out into the open like he wasn't afraid of anything on Earth. "Yo!" he called, voice carrying without yelling. For a second, nothing happened. Then Beard stepped from behind a semi-trailer, wiping his hands on a rag. He froze when he saw Jax, eyes flicking over the men forming behind him. Sunglasses appeared a heartbeat later, coming out of the warehouse door with a paper cup in his hand. He stopped mid-step like someone had hit pause. They recognized the patches. They recognized the threat. Sunglasses' mouth moved, but I couldn't hear what he said. Beard's eyes landed on me, and something sharp passed through his face. Recognition, and then calculation. Jax didn't move closer. "You took something that isn't yours," he said calmly. Sunglasses let out a short laugh, like he didn't believe it. "We bought it," he replied, voice carrying now. "Kid sold it. Legit." My stomach twisted. He said it like I was a piece of trash he'd stepped on. Jax's gaze didn't leave him. "You used a kid to steal," he said. "Where's Daniel?" The air changed instantly. Sunglasses' laugh died. Beard's jaw clenched. Roach shifted a little, and I saw his hand move toward his belt. Not dramatic, not like a movie, like a mechanic reaching for a tool. Sunglasses glanced past Jax, eyes scanning the container rows, looking for numbers, for angles, for a way out. "Don't know any, Daniel," he said. Jax took one step forward. The men behind him took one step too, perfectly matched. "You do," Jax said, "and you know what was on that bike." Beard's eyes flicked to the warehouse door, and that was the moment I understood something without anyone saying it. There were more people inside. Sunglasses' voice went colder. "You got a kid with you," he said, almost accusing. "That's your move?" Jax didn't look at me. "He's not the problem," he said. "You are." Sunglasses' gaze snapped to me again, and I felt it like a hand on my throat. "Kid remembers my face," he said. "That's unfortunate." My blood went ice. Jax's head tilted just slightly. "Say that again," he said. Sunglasses smiled, a thin strip of teeth. "I'm saying, mistakes happen." Roach made a sound like a growl. "We're done talking." Jax lifted a hand a fraction. Roach stopped, still vibrating with contained violence. Jax kept his voice even. "You're going to give me Daniel," he said, "and you're going to give me the bike, and then you get to decide whether you walk away breathing." Sunglasses stared at him, and for a second I thought he might cave. Not because he was scared, because he was measuring. Measuring the pack, measuring the street, measuring how much a lie might cost. Then Beard shifted his rag in his hand, and the metal clinked again. A garage door inside the warehouse began to rise with a slow, mechanical whine. My heart dropped. The door lifted just enough to reveal darkness and two silhouettes standing inside. One held something long and black in their hands. Jax's voice didn't change, but his body went rigid. "Kid," he said without looking at me, "behind the container." Now. I moved before my brain caught up, stumbling back into the shadowed gap. Gravel slipped under my shoes. The container's cold metal pressed against my shoulder. I heard Roach spit a curse. Sunglasses raised his cup slightly like a toast. "Should have stayed home," he said. Then everything happened at once. A sharp crack split the air, not a roar, not cinematic. A clean, violent snap that made my ears ring. Jax shoved Roach sideways, and both of them dropped behind the pickup's hood line. Another crack. A bullet pinged off metal somewhere close enough that sparks flashed. I squeezed my eyes shut and hugged myself, trying to disappear. "Move!" someone shouted. Boots pounded gravel. Engines coughed as bikes got kicked to life, not to charge, but to reposition, to block, to shield. The convoy wasn't a stampede. It was controlled chaos, like men flipping switches in their heads. I forced my eyes open because Jax told me to see. Through the gap, I saw Sunglasses dive behind a concrete barrier near the warehouse door. Beard sprinted toward the pickup, yanking open the driver door. Jax popped up for half a second, just long enough to aim. A crack answered. Beard jerked, stumbled, and slammed the door shut, using it as cover. He wasn't down, but he was slower now. Roach moved like a bulldozer, rushing low behind the semis, closing the distance. Scarjaw appeared at the far end of the lane, blocking the road. His bike angled across it like a wall. The warehouse door rose higher, revealing more shapes inside. 3, 4, at least, their weapons lifted. My stomach clenched so hard, I thought I'd throw up. I felt a hand on my shoulder and almost screamed. It was Jax, suddenly beside me, crouched low, his eyes scanning. "You okay?" he barked, not gentle, just urgent. I nodded, too fast. He grabbed the front of my helmet and held my face steady. "Listen," he said, voice cutting through the chaos. "If something happens and we get separated, you stay behind metal. You don't run into the open, you don't go toward the bikes, you stay low and you wait." I stared at him. "What about my dad?" His jaw tightened. "We're getting him." Another crack, closer. Jax flinched as something hit the container edge near us with a vicious ping. Jax looked toward the warehouse, eyes narrowing. "They're trying to buy time," he muttered. "Why?" I whispered. Jax glanced at me, and for a second his calm cracked enough that I saw the real thing under it, concern, maybe even fear, not for himself. "For what's inside," he said. Then he was gone again, moving back into the open like a man who didn't believe in dying. Roach shouted something, names, directions. Men answered in short words. Someone slammed a heavy object down, and I heard the grind of a metal gate shutting somewhere, cutting off an exit. The thieves weren't just defending, they were delaying. A truck engine rumbled from inside the warehouse, deep and heavy. My stomach dropped as understanding slammed into me. They were moving something, or someone. I leaned out just enough to see through the rising door. Inside, headlights flared in the dark, cutting white beams across concrete. A box truck parked deep inside had come to life. It began to roll forward slowly, like a big animal waking up. Jax saw it too. He shouted one word that made every man move at once. "Truck!" The pack surged, not reckless, calculated. Bikes roared as men mounted and shot forward to block the warehouse mouth. Roach sprinted toward the door, moving between covers like he'd done it 1,000 times. Sunglasses popped up from behind his barrier, weapon raised, firing toward the rush. Crack, crack, crack. One of the riders near the entrance went down hard, not dramatic, just suddenly not standing anymore. Another dragged him back behind a pallet stack, without looking at his face, like there wasn't time to feel. My throat tightened until it hurt. The box truck kept rolling, stubborn, toward the door opening. And then a figure stumbled into the edge of the headlights, hands bound, head hanging. Even from where I was, I recognized the posture, the slope of shoulders I'd hugged as a kid, the way the man tried to stand straight even when he couldn't. "Dad," I whispered, barely a sound. The figure lifted his head into the light. Daniel Carter's face was bruised and swollen, one eye nearly shut. But when he saw the line of bikes and the men moving like a wall, his gaze snapped sharp, searching. His eyes found the porch of my memory, found me in the container shadow, and even from this distance, I saw the exact moment his expression changed. Not relief. Pure, sudden terror. He mouthed one word at me, silent but clear as if he'd shouted it, "Run!" Before my brain could obey, the box truck surged forward faster, and a man inside yanked my dad sideways, dragging him out of the headlight beam. Jax lunged toward the warehouse mouth as the truck's front bumper broke into daylight. Roach reached the entrance and grabbed at the truck's door handle, and the warehouse door, still rising, suddenly stopped. Then it slammed down, a heavy metal crash that shook the ground. Roach jumped back at the last second, but the falling door clipped his shoulder hard enough to spin him. He hit the gravel and didn't get up right away. Jax swore, stepping in, but now the warehouse mouth was half sealed, just a narrow gap under the door, barely enough for the truck to squeeze through if it forced it. The box truck's engine roared, tires squealing as it pushed. Jax looked around, eyes searching, calculating. And then his gaze snapped straight to me, crouched in the shadow with my helmet too big and my hands shaking. "Liam!" he shouted over the chaos. "The air freshener, what did it say? Anything on it?" My brain scrambled, grabbing at the image on the footage, the yellow pine tree swinging from the mirror, but behind it. There had been something else, a tag, a small white rectangle, letters. I forced my eyes shut, replaying it in my head like a paused frame. The tag had a name printed on it, not a name like a person, a company. My eyes flew open. "River!" I shouted, voice cracking. "Riverline Logistics! It was on the tag!" Jax's face changed instantly, like I'd just handed him the address to hell. "Riverline," he repeated, and the way he said it made my stomach sink deeper than before, because it wasn't just a clue. It was a destination. The box truck forced itself under the half-sealed door, grinding metal on metal, sparks screaming along the concrete. Men scrambled to stop it, to wedge bikes, to grab handles, but the truck's weight was a moving wall. And then it burst through into daylight and turned hard toward the main road, straight toward the river, straight toward Riverline Logistics. Jax vaulted onto his bike in one motion and grabbed my arm. "Hold on," he snapped. I climbed behind him, barely getting my legs set before he launched forward. The pack roared after the truck like a storm given direction. Ahead, the box truck weaved into traffic, forcing cars aside. It didn't just flee, it fled like it knew exactly where it was going. And in the last second before we hit the intersection, I saw Sunglasses rise behind us near the containers, watching the chase with his weapon lowered, not panicked at all. Almost satisfied, like letting us follow was part of the plan. My grip tightened until my arms shook, because my dad had looked at me and mouthed, "Run," like I was the one in danger. And now, 200 bikes were chasing a truck that was carrying him away toward a company name that sounded clean and official. And nothing about this day was clean anymore. The chase didn't feel like a movie. It felt like a mistake that couldn't be unmade. Jax leaned the bike into the turn so hard, my helmet almost clipped his shoulder. The pack behind us poured through the intersection in disciplined bursts, some bikes stopping cross-traffic, others pushing forward, creating a moving corridor with brute coordination. Horns blared, a delivery van skidded to a halt. Somewhere, someone screamed. No one stopped to see who. Ahead, the box truck bulled through the middle lane like it owned the road. Its rear doors were shut tight, no windows, no way to see my dad, just a clean white rectangle with a printed logo near the bottom corner. Riverline. "Riverline Logistics," Roach's voice crackled from somewhere left and behind, close enough for me to hear through the wind. "That's a front. Been smelling them for months." Jax didn't look back. "They're running to home base," he shouted. My stomach churned. "Is Dad in there?" I yelled into his vest because the question was too big to keep inside. Jax's shoulders tightened. "He's in the plan," he snapped back. "Not yes, not no. Something worse." The box truck cut across 2 lanes, forcing a line of cars to scatter. It aimed for an exit ramp that peeled down toward the river's industrial spine, where the warehouses looked newer and the signs looked cleaner. Painted names, official fonts, security gates. A place that could pretend it was normal. Jax lifted his left hand and chopped it down twice. Instantly the pack split. Half surged straight, keeping pressure. Another wedge peeled off to the right, running parallel on a service road. A third group fell back, then accelerated up behind like a hammer ready to drop. They weren't chasing like angry men. They were hunting like trained ones. We hit the ramp. Wind slapped my faceplate. The smell of river mud and diesel hit my nose. The box truck took the curve too fast. Its back end fishtailed slightly, tires squealing. For a second the rear doors shuddered, and I pictured my dad thrown against the inside wall like a sack. "Dad!" I screamed, but it disappeared into the engine noise. Jax kept us close, but not suicidal. He stayed offset, watching the driver's mirrors. "They've got a shooter," he shouted, and I didn't know how he knew until a dark shape leaned out the passenger window of the truck's cab. A flash, a crack. The bullet smacked into the asphalt ahead, throwing a tiny puff of dust. Jax swore and dropped us lower, using the guardrail curve as cover. Behind us, bikes shifted positions like chess pieces, some falling back, others moving up to flank. Roach pulled even with us, his face hard under his helmet. "Kid," he shouted, "you sure it was Riverline?" "Yes," I shouted back, "on the tag." Roach nodded once, then accelerated forward toward the front wedge. Jax's voice went low, almost to himself. "Riverline's got a yard, cameras, guards. If they get inside the gate, it's a bunker." My hands tightened around him. "Then stop them before." Another crack cut me off. The shooter leaned out again, firing toward the bikes, trying to flank. One rider swerved violently and nearly clipped a sedan. The sedan spun, glass exploding as it hit the divider. My throat seized. This wasn't a closed course. This was real traffic, real people. Jack snapped his head left, shouting at a cluster of riders, and they shifted, widening the corridor, pushing civilians out of the danger zone like a moving wall. It was still dangerous, still reckless, but it wasn't mindless. The box truck barreled off the ramp into the river corridor, where roads narrowed between tall fences and stacked pallets. Ahead, A sign rose above a set of gates, Riverline Logistics, authorized personnel only. It looked like any company you'd drive past and forget. Except now it was the mouth of a trap. The gate was already moving, sliding open as if someone inside had been watching and timing it perfectly. Jax leaned forward. "They called ahead," he growled. The truck's engine surged. It was going to make it. Roach's wedge hit the service road to the right, accelerating along the fence line. Another group swung left, aiming for a side entrance I hadn't even noticed. Jax stayed straight. "Hold on," he said, and there was a tone in his voice that meant he was about to do something that didn't have a safe version. We shot forward, closing the gap to the truck's rear bumper. The doors loomed in front of us, blank and unforgiving. A rider from the left wedge came up, closer than I thought possible, and tossed something underhand toward Jax. Jax caught it one-handed without looking. A chain. Not a thin one. A heavy tow chain with hooks. My stomach dropped. "What are you—" Jax didn't answer. He threaded the chain around his left forearm in a practiced loop, then leaned the bike closer to the truck's rear corner, right where the bumper bracket met the frame. The shooter leaned out again. Crack. The bullet hit the road, but closer now, and I felt it in my teeth. Jax jerked the handlebars, swaying away for half a second, then snapped back in. He flung the hook. It clanged against metal, slipped, then caught. The chain snapped tight. For a split second, everything went weightless, like the world held its breath. Then, the chain yanked, and Jax's bike shuddered violently as it latched to the moving truck. My arms locked around him. "Jax!" I screamed. "Shut up and hold!" he barked. We were tethered now, a motorcycle attached to a box truck doing highway speed on a narrow industrial road. Jax used the tension like leverage, pulling our bike outward, dragging the truck's rear end slightly offline. The truck wobbled. The driver fought it. The shooter leaned out, panicked now, trying to aim down at the chain. Roach's bike slammed into the truck's left rear corner at an angle, not enough to flip it, just enough to jolt it. The truck's rear swung wider. Jax pulled again, harder, forcing the truck to drift toward the open gate's edge. The gate was sliding open fast, but not fast enough. The truck's rear bumper clipped the moving gate panel. Metal screamed. The panel buckled, slowing the truck for a fraction of a second. That fraction was everything. A rider from the left wedge shot forward and threw a spike strip, 2 quick flicks like tossing a rope, right under the truck's back wheels. The tires hit it. Pop, pop. The truck's rear sagged. Sparks burst as rubber shredded. The driver tried to gun it anyway, forcing the crippled truck toward the gate opening, but now it was dragging. The gate panel, bent and grinding, stole speed. The truck's rear wheels screamed in protest. Jax snapped the chain loose with a hard jerk, and we shot away, wobbling, barely staying upright. The truck lurched through the gate opening, half in, half out, its front wheels inside the yard, its rear stuck at the threshold, one shredded tire flapping like torn skin. For half a second, it stalled. Then, the yard exploded with movement. Security guards appeared behind the fence line, uniforms, radios, weapons that weren't supposed to be on logistics property. A guard tower's window slid open. Something long and black rose into view. Jax swore. "They've got Overwatch!" Roach's voice roared from the left, furious. "No more road games!" The pack poured toward the gate like a flood, but not all of them. Some peeled off immediately, climbing the outside fence line with bolt cutters and hooks, working the perimeter like they'd mapped it. Jax dismounted and yanked me off the bike behind him, keeping a hand on my collar like a lifeline. He shoved me behind a concrete jersey barrier just outside the gate. "Stay," he ordered. "Do not move." I crouched, peering through the gap between barrier and fence. The box truck's cab door flew open. The driver jumped out and sprinted deeper into the yard without even looking back, like he knew the truck was disposable. The passenger, the shooter, climbed out too, weapon in hand, and turned toward the rear doors. He didn't run. He walked like he had time, like what was in the back mattered more than surviving. He reached the rear latch, yanked it hard, and swung one door open just enough to look inside. I held my breath. From my angle, I saw only darkness, and then a movement, someone shifting, struggling. The shooter leaned in, grabbed something, and dragged it toward the door opening. A bound wrist appeared first, then an arm. Then my dad's shoulder, my dad's face, bruised and swollen, shoved into the daylight. Daniel's eyes, one half shut, found the world outside the truck, found the bikes, found the gate, and then, like before, his gaze snapped not to the men, not to the weapons, not to the chaos. To me, to the concrete barrier where I crouched. His eyes widened, his mouth moved again, but this time he didn't say, "Run." He mouthed something longer. 3 words. I leaned forward, heart pounding so hard it blurred my vision, trying to read his lips. His lips formed it clearly, urgently, like he was begging me to understand. "They're not—" A guard tower cracked. A shot rang out, louder, heavier, not aimed at the pack, aimed at the truck. The bullet slammed into the metal right beside my dad's head, exploding sparks and shrapnel. My dad flinched, and the shooter yanked him back hard, slamming the door halfway closed again. Jax's head snapped up toward the tower, rage flashing. He pointed, and 2 riders broke off instantly toward the fence line, racing for an angle on the tower. Roach charged the gate, using a fallen gate panel as cover, barking orders. Men moved like they'd rehearsed this exact layout. Inside the yard, more guards rushed in. Too many, too organized. This wasn't just thieves, this was infrastructure. Jax crouched beside me for a split second, eyes scanning the yard and the tower. "You see your dad?" he demanded. "Yes," I choked. "He's in the back." Jax's jaw clenched so tight a vein stood out. "Good. Keep eyes on the truck. If they move it, you tell me. If they move him, you tell me." I nodded, barely breathing. The rear door of the truck shifted again, just a crack, then shut. The latch clanked. They weren't going to unload him here. They were going to move him deeper, where the bikes couldn't reach. My brain raced, searching for anything useful. I scanned the yard beyond the truck. Pallets stacked, forklifts parked, a row of semi-trailers lined up like a wall. A side driveway that curved behind a building marked "Maintenance." And then I saw it. A second gate inside the yard, farther back. An internal sliding gate leading to a deeper compound. It was opening. A forklift rolled into position beside the truck, lining up like it was about to tow or push. They were going to push the crippled truck through the internal gate. Jax was yelling to Roach, trying to coordinate a push into the yard before the tower could pick them off one by one. I leaned out from behind the barrier, eyes burning. And on the forklift side, stenciled in black letters, was a number. Not just a number. A route code. RL-17. Something clicked in my head from school field trips, from delivery trucks behind the grocery store. Route codes meant destinations, where they were going next. I sucked in a breath and screamed, voice shredding through the roar of engines and gunfire. RL-17, the forklift, RL-17, that's their route. Jax's head snapped toward me. For the first time, his calm shattered into sharp focus. RL-17, he repeated, and I watched him do the math in real time. That's not a yard code, that's a run. He grabbed his radio mic and barked into it. All units, they're moving him on RL-17. Find the exit point. Roach's voice answered immediately, brutal. Copy, we cut the run. Inside the yard, the forklift pressed into the truck's rear. The crippled box truck began to move again, inching forward, grinding rubber and metal as it was shoved toward the internal gate. And my dad, still inside, was being pushed away from me, away from the street, away from the only chance I could see. The internal gate slid wider. The compound beyond it looked darker, tighter, like a throat. Jax rose from behind the barrier, eyes hard, and in that moment I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a rescue anymore. This was a race. And the people inside Riverline had planned the route. They'd planned the gates. They'd planned the tower. Maybe they'd even planned the convoy showing up. Because as the truck crossed the internal threshold, I saw Sunglasses again, standing inside the yard near a stack of pallets, watching the chaos with that same thin, satisfied smile. He wasn't running. He wasn't scared. He was exactly where he wanted to be. And my dad's unfinished words, "They're not," hung in my head like a siren that hadn't finished sounding. The moment the internal gate started sliding, the whole fight outside the yard changed shape. Roach stopped trying to bull straight through the main opening. He barked orders with one hand up, palms slicing the air like he was cutting the scene into pieces. "Stop feeding the tower!" he roared. "Move out! Move wide!" Bikes peeled away from the gate in controlled bursts, fanning back onto the access road, then splitting again. Some heading north along the fence line, others dropping toward the riverside service lanes. They weren't retreating. They were repositioning. Jax grabbed my collar and hauled me up from behind the barrier. "Helmet stays on," he snapped. "Eyes up. You see anything marked RL-17 again? You yell it." He pulled me to the bike and shoved me onto the seat behind him like there was no debate left in the universe. I clamped my arms around him, and we launched, hard, away from the gate. Behind us, Riverline's guard tower kept firing in measured cracks, not spraying, not panicking, choosing shots, forcing the pack to stop playing hero at the entrance. It was exactly what my dad would have predicted. "They're not," the words kept looping in my head, unfinished and poisonous. "They're not what? Not thieves? Not Hell's Angels? Not who they say they are?" We hit the service road running parallel to Riverline's perimeter fence. The river flashed between buildings like a dirty mirror. Overhead, power lines hummed. A cargo crane loomed in the distance like a bent skeleton. Jack spoke into his mic in short bursts. "Find the run. Cut the run. Don't chase the yard." A voice crackled back, one of the riders I hadn't met. "Southside's got a dock road. Could be the route." Another. "Rail spur behind the maintenance building." Roach, "I'm taking 5 to the river access. Jax, stay with the kid." Jax didn't answer. His jaw was locked. His focus was a narrow tunnel aimed at whatever RL-17 meant. We whipped around a corner past a storage lot stacked with blue shipping containers. A semi-horn blared as a truck driver saw the pack and slammed his brakes. Then Jax slowed abruptly, just enough that my stomach lurched. Ahead, painted on the side of a low building, was a faded map sign, one of those yard layout/route/safety boards companies put up for truckers. And in big block letters at the bottom, Riverline Route RL-17, dock access/East Channel. Jack stabbed a finger toward it without looking back. "That's our line." He gunned the bike again, and we shot down a narrower lane that ran toward the water. The asphalt here was cracked and patched, dotted with puddles that reflected gray sky. The pack tightened around us again, but smaller now, maybe 30 bikes, not 200, because the rest had dispersed to cut off exits. I risked a glance back. In the distance, Riverline's yard still seethed. Sirens weren't wailing. Cops weren't rushing in. Everything was staying contained on purpose. That alone terrified me more than gunfire. We hit a bend, and the lane opened into a dock corridor. Tall fences, stacked pallets, and a row of warehouse doors facing the river. Barges sat on the water like sleeping beasts. A tugboat idled farther out, smoke drifting from its stack. Jack slowed again, scanning. Then I saw it. Fresh tire marks, black and angry, cutting across the wet asphalt, a shredded rubber flap, and a smear of something dark where the box truck's blown tires had ground against the ground. "They came this way," I shouted. Jax didn't respond. He didn't need to. He accelerated along the marks like they were arrows. At the end of the dock corridor was a security arm gate, lowered, but the gate was bent upward like someone had rammed it recently. Beyond it, the lane split. One branch led to a wide loading platform by the river. The other led under an overpass into a shadowed service tunnel. Jax aimed for the loading platform first. We skidded into the open space, and my stomach clenched because the platform was active. Forklifts moving, dock workers in safety vests turning their heads, mouths open, hands freezing mid-motion. They looked like normal people. Too normal. Jax cut the engine and walked the bike forward, not rushing now, scanning faces, watching hands. Roach's group arrived from another lane and spread out, blocking the dock exits. A forklift operator stopped dead, eyes wide behind clear safety glasses. Jax pointed at him. "RL-17, he said, voice low. "Where's the truck?" The operator shook his head fast. "I don't—" Roach stepped in, not touching him, just filling his vision. "Don't lie," Roach said. "You saw it." The man swallowed hard. His eyes flicked toward the service tunnel under the overpass. Jax followed the glance like it was a rope. "Tunnel," he said. The operator's hands trembled as he lifted them. "They told us to clear the lane," he stammered. "Said it was a rush shipment. I didn't ask." "Who told you?" Jax demanded. The operator's eyes darted to a supervisor by the office door, a man in a clean jacket, hard hat, spotless, standing too still. That supervisor didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He turned and walked briskly into the office. Jax saw it. Roach saw it. Roach bolted. The supervisor slammed the office door and yanked down a metal shutter. The shutter clanged into place, sealing the window like a bunker. Roach hit the door with his shoulder once, twice, hard enough to rattle the frame, then stepped back, breathing heavy, deciding. Jax didn't waste time. He turned back to me. "Tunnel," he said. "We're going in." My mouth went dry. "What's in there?" "Where they think we can't follow," Roach answered. Jax mounted the bike. I climbed behind him. The pack regrouped and poured toward the overpass. The tunnel mouth was a rectangular cut into the concrete, dark as a throat. A flickering light inside threw weak yellow pools across wet ground. The smell hit us before we entered. Diesel, river rot, and that bleach cleaner bite again, heavier than ever. Jax slowed as we crossed into the tunnel, and the sound changed, engines echoing off concrete, turning into a rolling growl. Inside, the tunnel widened into a long corridor with side alcoves, maintenance bays, old storage rooms, and a few rusting rail carts on tracks that ran parallel to the lane. And there, 50 yards ahead, was the box truck. Half hidden, angled toward a metal roll-up door at the far end. Its rear tires were shredded, but it was still moving, being pushed again, this time by a heavy tow tractor hooked to its front. The tow tractor's driver wore a Riverline vest, not a thief, not a biker, an employee. My stomach flipped. Jax's voice went razor sharp. "They've got help." The pack surged forward. The tow driver saw us in the mirrors and panicked, gunning the tractor harder. The box truck lurched forward, grinding sparks as its rims scraped concrete. Roach's bike shot up on the left, trying to cut between the wall and the truck to reach the cab. A guard stepped out from a side alcove with a rifle. Not a security guard in a mall uniform, a guard in tactical gear. He raised the rifle. Jax swerved, pulling us tight against the right wall. "Down!" he barked, and I folded instinctively, pressing my head to his back. A crack exploded. The bullet slammed into the concrete behind us, showering grit. Roach's bike fishtailed, but he kept it upright, roaring past the shooter's line. Another crack. A rider behind us screamed, just one raw sound. Then his bike wobbled and crashed into the wall, sparks spraying like fireworks. Two others swerved to avoid him, tires squealing on wet concrete. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. Jax kept moving, weaving, using the truck as cover. We drew even with the box truck's rear doors. I stared at them, willing them to open, willing my dad to be there, to shout, to signal anything. Then the rear door latch shifted. Not from inside. From the outside, someone riding on a step welded to the truck's frame. A man in a Riverline vest, one hand gripping a handle, the other holding the latch. He yanked it open a crack and shoved something inside. A black bag. The door slammed shut again. Jax saw it and his whole posture changed. "They're transferring," he snarled, "not just moving." Roach yelled over the echo, "That's not a route run, that's an extraction." The tow tractor dragged the truck up to the roll-up door. The door began to rise, slow and heavy. Beyond it, darkness, a second tunnel, or a warehouse interior, or something worse. The guard in tactical gear fired again, forcing riders to duck and slow. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it bought seconds. Seconds were what Riverline was trading in. The roll-up door rose high enough for the tractor and truck to squeeze through. Jack slammed the throttle. We shot forward, closing the last gap, and then the floor dropped. Not a cliff. A shallow maintenance pit covered by slick steel plates flooded with water and oil. The tow tractor crossed it fine, heavy, stable, but bikes hit it and skated. Jax's back went rigid. He corrected, handlebars twitching, tires sliding sideways. My arms tightened, panic spiking. We made it across, barely, rubber slipping but catching again on dry concrete. Ahead, the roll-up door was almost fully open now. The tow tractor began pulling the box truck through. Roach's bike slammed into the truck's rear bumper, trying to stop it, forcing it sideways just a little. The truck's rear door shuddered. A muffled thump came from inside. My chest seized. "Dad!" I screamed, and this time it felt like it tore my throat. The truck lurched again, and the thumping stopped. Jax drew even with the rear door, close enough that if it opened I could touch it. Then, the door beyond, inside the darkness, glowed with headlights. Not the trucks, something deeper inside, a vehicle waiting. A clean black SUV, idling in the dark like it had been parked there all along. And in the driver's seat, barely visible through the windshield, sat a man in a suit. Not a worker, not a guard, A businessman. He lifted a phone to his ear, watched the chaos with calm eyes, and smiled. Jack saw him too, and for the first time, I heard something in Jax's voice that wasn't control or rage. Recognition. "Oh," Jax breathed, like the name tasted bad. "It's him." He leaned forward, shouting into his mic with a fury that shook the tunnel. "Roach, it's Hollis. Hollis is here." The name meant nothing to me, but it meant everything to them. Because Roach's face, visible for half a second as he glanced back, went from anger to something colder, something like dread. And the roll-up door kept rising, and the box truck kept moving, and my dad stayed hidden inside, being delivered not to thieves, but to a man in a suit who looked like he'd been waiting for us. The black SUV idled in the dark like it belonged there more than the forklifts, more than the roll-up door, more than the whole tunnel. It didn't lurch or panic or scramble for space. It waited. The man in the suit, Hollis, kept his phone to his ear, watching as if this was a meeting that had started a few minutes late. Roach swore so viciously it echoed off concrete. "That polished son of—" Jax cut him off, a voice like steel. "Eyes on the truck." The tow tractor dragged the box truck forward. The roll-up door was fully raised now, framing the exit into a wider interior corridor lit by strip lights. The moment the truck's rear wheels crossed the threshold, a secondary metal gate began sliding from the side, thick bars, industrial, the kind you could drive a tank into and still lose. They were going to seal us out. Jax didn't hesitate. He stood the bike up, accelerated, and shot through the opening behind the truck before the gate could close. My stomach tried to climb into my throat. "Jax! Hold!" he barked, and that was all. 2 bikes followed us, then 3 more. Not the whole pack, just the ones fast enough, close enough, reckless enough to commit. Roach was one of them. He slammed into the gap on Jax's left, handlebars inches from the closing gate. Metal screamed as the bars clipped his saddlebag, tearing leather open like paper. The gate slammed shut behind us with a boom that shook dust off the ceiling. We were inside, cut off from the rest. In front of us, the tow tractor and box truck rolled deeper into the riverline belly. Forklifts sat idle along the walls like sleeping animals. Cameras watched from every corner, their lenses tiny and indifferent. The man in the suit eased his SUV forward, never speeding, never rushing, just guiding like a shepherd. Jack swerved left, trying to get an angle on the box truck's rear doors. Roach pulled right, scanning for an opening to flank the tow tractor. A guard in tactical gear stepped out from behind a concrete pillar and raised his rifle. Jack snapped the bike sideways behind a parked pallet stack. The rifle barked once, a clean crack, and splinters flew from the pallet wood. Roach returned fire, not wild, not constant, 2 measured shots that forced the guard to duck back. I curled into myself, helmet pressed against Jax's back, trying not to become a problem. My hands shook so hard I couldn't feel my fingertips. Jax leaned back just enough to look at me. His eyes were narrowed slits behind his visor. "If I tell you to get off and run, you run," he said. "Not toward the gate, not toward the noise, toward light. You find an exit and you keep moving." I nodded, but my brain screamed the same thing over and over. Dad is in the truck. The corridor widened into a loading bay that looked too clean to be real. Polished concrete, bright lights, painted safety lines, Riverline logos everywhere, smiling corporate blue. The box truck rolled onto the center line and stopped. The tow tractor disconnected and backed away. Hollis's SUV pulled up 10 yards away and halted, engine still purring. Hollis lowered his window and leaned his elbow on the frame like he was at a drive-thru. He wasn't looking at Jax, he was looking at the truck. Then he spoke into his phone, short, calm words, and ended the call. He stepped out. Suit jacket, pressed shirt, no tie. His shoes didn't belong on concrete this dirty. He walked with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Roach braked hard, skidding his bike sideways into a fighting stance. "Hollis!" he roared. "You want to stand here and pretend you're not involved?" Hollis's expression didn't change. He lifted his hands slightly, palms open, the universal gesture of peace. "Roach," he said, like they were old co-workers, "you're making a mess in my facility." Roach's laugh was pure hate. "Your facility? Funny. Last I checked, you moved boxes, not bodies." Hollis glanced at Jax, finally acknowledging him. "Jax," he said, tone polite. "Always dramatic." Jax didn't answer. He kept his bike angled between Hollis and the box truck like a shield. "Where's Daniel?" Jax demanded. Hollis's eyes flicked to the truck's rear doors, then back. "Daniel made choices," he said. "Sometimes choices have consequences." My stomach twisted. I knew that voice, not because I'd heard it before, but because it sounded like the kind of man who could ruin your life without raising his voice. Roach revved his engine once, the sound loud in the clean bay. "You're playing businessman, but we both know what you are." Hollis sighed as if Roach was exhausting. "What I am," he said, "is a man who keeps the river moving. Goods, money, influence. People like you exist because people like me tolerate it." "People like us exist because you need us," Roach spat. Hollis's smile was small. "Today I don't." Then he turned his head slightly and nodded toward the catwalk above the bay. I followed his gaze, and my blood went cold. Up on the catwalk, behind a railing, stood 3 men in tactical gear with rifles pointed down. Perfect angles, perfect cover. They weren't panicked thieves. They were professionals, stationed like they'd been waiting for a drill. Jack saw them too. His shoulders tightened, and I felt the first real, ugly truth settle into my gut. We were outnumbered inside. And outside, the rest of the pack was trapped behind a gate. Hollis walked toward the box truck with measured steps. "Open it," he said to no one in particular. A Riverline worker in a safety vest hurried forward, hands trembling, and unlatched the rear doors. He pulled them open. The darkness inside spilled out like a breath. And then my dad was there. Daniel Carter was sitting on the truck floor, wrists zip-tied, ankles bound, his shirt torn and stained. His face was swollen in places I didn't want to name, but his eyes were sharp, scanning, alive. They found me instantly, and the look that hit me wasn't anger. It was pain that was almost worse than anger, like he was seeing the exact moment he'd lost control of his own life. "Dad," I whispered, and it came out as air. He tried to speak, but his mouth was split. His lips moved anyway. "Liam," he rasped, voice barely there. Hollis leaned into the truck, unbothered by my dad's blood. "Daniel," he said, conversational, "you brought company." Dad's head lifted with effort. "You used my kid." Hollis shrugged. "Your kid used you. I merely benefited." Roach surged forward, fury shaking him. "Touch him and you die." Hollis didn't look at Roach. He looked at Jax. "You understand the terms," he said. "You show up with 200 bikes, you threaten my yard, you kill my security." "We didn't kill," Roach started. Hollis raised a finger and Roach stopped mid-word like he'd been trained. That tiny power move made my skin crawl. Hollis continued, "And you expect me to hand you back what Daniel stole from me?" Jax's voice went dangerously calm. "Daniel didn't steal from you. He moved something for the club." Hollis smiled wider. "The club doesn't own the river," he said. "I do." Dad coughed, wet and painful. "It wasn't yours." Hollis's eyes hardened a fraction. "It was in my lane," he replied. "That makes it mine." He reached into the truck and grabbed the black bag I'd seen shoved inside earlier. He weighed it in his hand like it was nothing. Then he looked at Jax. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "I'll keep this. You'll leave. Daniel will live, barely, and your boys outside will drive away before police show up." Roach barked a laugh. "Police?" He gestured at the rifles above. "You think cops are coming here?" Hollis's gaze didn't move. "Not the ones you're thinking of." Jax's jaw clenched. "If you had that kind of heat," he said, "you wouldn't need rifles on a catwalk." Hollis took a step closer, still calm. "You'd be surprised what people need," he said. "Now. I'm going to give Daniel one chance. He tells me where the rest is, where he hid it after he realized the bike was compromised, or he doesn't see his family again." My heart stopped. "What?" I choked. Dad's head snapped up, rage and fear mixing. "Leave them out of it." Hollis's eyes flicked to me like he'd just remembered I existed. "Too late," he said. "The boy already made his decision." Roach's hands clenched around his grips. "You said you don't need us," he growled. "Then why not finish him and move on?" Hollis's smile returned, faint. "Because I'm not a monster, Roach," he said, and it was the biggest lie I'd ever heard. "I'm a businessman. Dead men complicate ledgers." He turned back to my dad. "Where is it?" he asked. Dad's chest rose and fell hard. His eyes met mine again, and I saw something there, an apology so big it didn't fit in the space between us. Then his gaze shifted slightly past me, toward Jax's bike, toward Roach's position, toward the floor, like he was measuring, calculating, planning something with nothing. Dad's lips moved. "Liam," he rasped. Jax snapped, "Daniel, don't." Dad's voice strengthened just enough to cut through. "Look at me," he said. I did. His eyes burned into mine. "You remember that note?" he whispered. I swallowed. "Yes." Dad's jaw trembled with pain. "Good," he said, "because I wrote it for a reason." Hollis sighed, impatient. "Touching," he said. "Now answer the—" Dad suddenly jerked his bound hands toward the truck floor, slamming his wrist down with all the force he had left. A metallic clink answered, sharp, unmistakable. A small object skittered out from under his thigh and bounced onto the bay floor. A key. Not a car key, an old-fashioned brass key with a red tag. Hollis's eyes snapped down. Jax's head turned the same instant. Roach moved first. He lunged off his bike, boots slapping concrete, snatching the key off the floor. Hollis's face changed, real anger for the first time. "No!" Gunfire erupted from the catwalk. Crack, 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 clean shots aimed to pin, not spray. Roach dove behind a forklift, key clenched in his fist. Jax yanked his bike forward, shielding me with the bulk of it as bullets pinged off concrete. Hollis barked into the air, "Take the kid!" The words hit me like ice water. From the side corridor, 2 tactical guards sprinted in, fast, trained, moving not toward Roach or Jax, but toward me. My body froze for half a second. Then Dad screamed, raw and broken, "Liam!" Jax grabbed my backpack strap and yanked me off the bike. "Run!" he roared, finally the word. "Light! Now!" I stumbled, boots slipping on smooth concrete, the bay's bright lights blurred. I heard Roach firing from behind the forklift. I heard Hollis shouting orders. I heard my dad's voice, hoarse and furious, trying to rise even with his ankles bound. I ran toward a side door with a green exit sign, pushing through swinging safety curtains into a narrower hallway lined with pipes. Footsteps pounded behind me. I glanced back and saw a guard closing fast, rifle held tight, eyes locked on me like I was a package. My lungs burned. My legs felt too small for this. The hallway forked, left toward an emergency stairwell, right toward a maintenance room with a half-open door. I darted right without thinking, slamming into the maintenance room. It smelled like oil and wet metal. Tools hung on pegboards. A rolling cart sat near a stack of folded tarps. No exit. My heart crashed against my ribs. The guard filled the doorway, rifle angled down now, confident. "Kid," he said, voice flat, "come here." I backed up until my calves hit the cart. My hands fumbled for anything, wrench, screwdriver, anything that wasn't useless. The guard stepped inside. Then, behind him, a second figure appeared in the doorway. Not Jax, not Roach. A Riverline worker in a safety vest, the same one who'd opened the truck doors. His face was pale, eyes wide with panic. He looked at the guard, then at me, and in that split second, he made a choice. He lifted a heavy metal tool, a breaker bar, from the cart by the door and swung it with both hands. The bar connected with the guard's helmeted head with a sickening thud. The guard dropped like his strings had been cut. I screamed, stumbling sideways, but the worker grabbed my wrist hard. "Move!" he hissed. "Now!" I stared at him, shocked. "Why, no time!" he snapped, dragging me toward a back door I hadn't seen. "Hollis will kill me anyway!" He shoved the door open and we burst into a narrow exterior alley between 2 buildings. Cold air hit my face like a slap. Sirens wailed somewhere distant now, real ones, or maybe Riverlines. I couldn't tell. The worker yanked me along the alley at a run. "Name?" he demanded. "Liam," I panted. He nodded once. "I'm Nate," he said. "Listen to me, Liam. Your dad. He's not the one they want." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" Nate glanced back, eyes wild. "The bag," he said. "What's in it? Hollis thinks Daniel has the rest, but Daniel isn't the target." My breath hitched. "Then who is?" Nate's grip tightened. "You," he said. The word landed like a hammer. I almost stopped running, but Nate dragged me forward harder. "He used you to steal the bike because it brings the club. It brings attention. It brings chaos. In the chaos, Hollis moves what he really cares about." "What does he care about?" I choked. Nate swallowed, voice dropping. "A list," he said. "Names, payoffs, routes, everyone he owns. Daniel took a copy, hid it. That key, Roach grabbed. That key opens the locker where Daniel stashed it. My brain tried to keep up and failed. Then why me? Nate's face twisted with fear. Because the locker isn't in the yard, he said. It's at the dock, public side. Hollis can't storm it with rifles without cameras seeing. But if he has you, he can trade you for the key in the list. Quiet, clean. My legs went numb as I ran. My dad tried to warn me, I whispered, hearing his unfinished words in my head. They're not. Nate jerked me around a corner into a wider service lane. Ahead, a small door in a fence stood open, leading toward the river access where we'd entered earlier. We get you out, Nate panted. You get to your family. You tell them to leave. Now. Not later. Now. Gunshots echoed from inside the building, muffled by walls but still sharp. Nate shoved me through the fence door and into the open dock corridor. And right there, under the overpass shadow, I saw the worst possible thing. A line of black SUVs rolling in from the far end, headlights off, moving slow. Not police, not bikers. Men in suits and tactical vests stepping out calmly, spreading across the lane like a net tightening. Nate stopped so hard, I nearly slammed into him, his face drained of color. He's already here, he whispered. One of the men looked straight at us from 30 yards away and raised a hand, 2 fingers, to his ear as if receiving a message. Then he pointed at me, and the SUVs sped up. The black SUVs didn't rush like panicked men. They flowed forward like they'd already measured the space, already decided where everyone would end up. Nate's grip on my wrist tightened until it hurt. Don't run straight, he hissed. They'll herd you. I could barely breathe. The dock corridor was a long funnel, fences on both sides, overpass overhead, nowhere to disappear except back toward Riverline or deeper toward the water. The suited man who'd pointed at me raised his hand again, palm down, and the SUVs split, 2 rolling left to block the tunnel mouth, one stopping at an angle to cut off the open lane, and the last easing forward like it wanted to be the first thing I saw when I tried to run. Doors opened. Men stepped out, not loud, not showy, no screaming, just boots on wet asphalt and the quiet click of weapons being unslung. Nate turned my head with his hand, forcing me to look away from the line. Listen, he said, voice shaking but focused. I'm going to make you look like you got away. You go where I point, you don't stop, you don't look back. What about my dad? I gasped. Nate's eyes flicked toward Riverline's direction, guilt slicing across his face. If you're taken, he said, your dad dies anyway. So do you. So do your mom and sister. Hollis doesn't trade once he owns you. He owns the problem. My stomach lurched. I'm 10, I whispered, like the world should care. Nate's jaw clenched. Hollis doesn't see 10, he said. He sees leverage. A voice called out from the SUV line, calm, professional. Liam Carter. Hearing my full name out loud made my skin crawl. My brain flashed to my house, to Mom's face in the doorway, to Emma clutching her rabbit. They knew everything. Liam, the voice continued, we're here to help you. Walk toward us. No one gets hurt. It wasn't Hollis's voice. Different tone, same certainty. Nate shoved me behind a stack of pallets by the fence line, crouching with me. He peeked through a gap, then pulled back fast. They've got 2 on the high side, he muttered. Overpass support column. You move in the open, they drop you. I stared at him, terrified. Then what do we do? Nate's hand patted his vest pockets like he was checking for something. He pulled out a small radio, Riverline issued. His thumb hovered over the button, trembling. You can't, I started. Watch me, he snapped, then pressed it. His voice changed instantly, deeper, steadier, like he'd practiced lying in his head. Dock control, this is Nate. We got a kid loose at East Corridor. Security closing in. I'm on him. He released the button and looked at me. Now, he whispered, you run like you're running from me too. I don't understand. You will, he said, and then he stood up suddenly, stepping out from behind the pallets with his hands spread, making himself visible. Liam, he shouted, loud enough for the suited men to hear. Stop! Get back here! For a split second, it worked. Heads turned toward him. The suited man who'd called my name shifted his stance, recalculating. Nate pointed hard down the lane toward the waterside loading platform, where stacked shipping containers created a narrow maze. Go! He roared. I ran. My legs felt like they weren't mine. My shoes slapped wet asphalt. My breath sawed in my throat. Behind me, the calm voice barked something sharp. "Move!" Footsteps pounded. An engine revved. One SUV lurched forward to cut me off. Nate sprinted after me too, shouting like he meant it. "Liam, stop!" To anyone watching, he was chasing me for real. I cut left between two container stacks, squeezing into a narrow passage that smelled like rust and river water. My shoulder scraped metal. I stumbled but didn't fall. The passage spit me out into a wider container yard. Sunlight hit here, gray and flat. The river was visible beyond the fence. Dark water, slow current, a barge idling. My brain screamed for an exit. There wasn't one. Just more containers, more fences, more dead ends. I heard the SUV's tires crunch gravel at the end of the lane. Nate appeared behind me, panting hard. "Left," he hissed. "2 rows down. There's a maintenance hatch under the 3rd container line. You crawl. You don't stand up." "What?" Nate shoved me forward again. "Move!" I ran down the container row. Gravel sprayed under my shoes. I ducked under a dangling chain and nearly tripped. At the 3rd row, Nate dropped to his knees and grabbed a metal grate set into the ground near the fence line. He yanked. It didn't budge. He swore, pulled a tool from his belt, something like a flat pry bar, and jammed it into the seam. With a grunt, he lifted. The grate popped free with a metallic squeal. A dark hole yawned beneath, with a ladder leading down into damp concrete. "Down," he whispered. I hesitated, staring into the black. Nate's eyes flicked up sharply. "They're coming." I heard footsteps close now, men moving fast. I swallowed and climbed down, hands sliding on cold metal, heart hammering. The air below was wet and foul, like old river water trapped in concrete. As soon as my feet hit the bottom, Nate dropped the grate back into place above me, leaving only a thin slice of light through the edges. The darkness wrapped around me. For a second, all I could hear was my own breathing and the distant thud of boots overhead. Then, Nate's voice came down through the metal, muffled but urgent. "Stay quiet," he said. "No sound." Something slammed into the containers above, a door clanging. Voices, multiple, sharp, controlled. "Spread out. Check the rows. Overwatch, keep eyes." I pressed my hands over my mouth to keep my breathing from turning into sobs. A shadow passed over the grate seam. Someone stood directly above me. I froze so hard my muscles ached. The shadow lingered. A metal clang sounded as something tapped the grate. Once, twice, not random, testing. My stomach dropped. They suspected. A voice spoke, low and confident. "He's down there." The grate rattled, hands gripping the edges, starting to lift. Then Nate's voice cut in, closer, louder, above. "Hold up," he snapped. "That hatch feeds the storm line. If you open it, you'll flood the corridor." A pause, another voice, colder. "Move." The grate shifted again. Then Nate did something I didn't expect. I heard his footsteps run away, fast, then a loud metallic crash and a shouted curse, like he'd knocked something over to create chaos in another direction. Men shouted, "There! He's running!" The grate stopped moving. Footsteps pounded away from my hiding spot. I sagged against the damp concrete wall, legs shaking uncontrollably. A minute passed, maybe 2. Time didn't behave normally down there. Then Nate's voice returned, whispering through the seam, breathless. "They bought it. For now," I whispered back, barely audible. "Nate, are you okay?" A beat. "No," he said honestly. "But you're alive." I wanted to cry, but fear dried it up. Nate continued, fast. "You can't stay there. This line runs under the dock road and comes out by the old pump house. There's a ladder. When you get out, you go to the only place Hollis can't control, public cameras. You get to a crowd." I swallowed. "My mom, my sister." "I know," Nate said, and his voice cracked for half a second. "That's why you need to get a message to them, now." "How?" I whispered. No phone. Nate went quiet. Then, like he'd made a decision that hurt, he said, "You'll get one." The grate above shifted slightly, and a small object slipped through the seam and clattered down the ladder rungs. A phone, cheap, cracked screen, probably a burner. I snatched it, fingers trembling. The screen lit up with a single open contact screen. Mom. My throat seized. "Nate." He didn't answer the thanks. "Go," he whispered. "I can't hold them long." Footsteps approached again overhead, closer, slower this time. They were searching properly now. Nate's breathing came through the seam, sharp. "They'll realize I'm lying," he said. "When they do, they'll kill me. But I can buy you minutes." My voice came out broken. "Why are you helping me?" A long beat. Then Nate said, "Because I have a son," he whispered, "and I watched your dad take hits he didn't deserve, and I'm done working for monsters." A voice shouted overhead. "Nate, where's the kid?" Nate answered instantly, loud, steady. "He went west, toward the barge." He was sacrificing himself. I understood that fully now, and it made me feel sick. Nate's voice dropped again. "Stormline," he said. "Go now." I stared into the darkness ahead, where the tunnel continued, knee-deep water in places, concrete slick under my shoes. I turned on the phone's flashlight and started moving. The light beam shook with my hands. The tunnel smelled like rot and metal. Water dripped steadily from above, a constant ticking. I waded forward, trying not to splash. My shoes sank into shallow muck. The flashlight caught graffiti on the walls, names, dates, crude drawings, proof that other people had hidden here before. My mind kept flashing to Dad in the truck, to Hollis's calm face, to the rifles above the loading bay. I couldn't reconcile any of it. I forced myself to dial Mom. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" Mom's voice came through, thin and terrified. "Liam?" "Mom," I whispered, voice breaking. "Listen, you have to leave, now. Take Emma, go to a crowded place, anywhere with cameras. Don't stay home." "Liam, where are you? They took Dad," I choked. "They're trying to take me. You have to go." A sob caught in her throat. "Who? The bikers?" "No," I whispered, and Dad's unfinished warning finally found its ending in my mind. They're not here to help us. Not all of them." "Liam, what are you saying?" Mom's voice shook. "Are the angels—" "I don't know," I said, because the truth was I didn't know who was on whose side anymore. "But Riverline, Hollis, he knows where we live. Please, go." Mom's breathing went ragged. "Emma's scared. I'm scared. I can't—" "Yes, you can," I said, and it came out fiercer than I expected. "Go to the hospital lobby. There are people, cameras, security." "I'll call the police," she whispered. "No," I hissed, and fear spiked. "Not from home. Just go. I'll call. Someone will call. Just go now." Mom went quiet, then I heard movement, drawers, footsteps. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we're leaving." "Text me your location," I said, then realized she couldn't if I didn't know my number. Just keep this line open if you can." "Liam," Mom sobbed, "I'm so sorry." I swallowed hard. "I know." The tunnel opened into a wider chamber where a storm drain split into two branches. One branch ran toward a faint sound of machinery, the pump house. The other ran toward the river. I chose the pump house because Nate told me to. As I moved, I heard a muffled pop overhead. Gunfire. A tool dropped. My body flinched violently. Then a scream echoed faintly through the concrete, cut off too fast. My stomach turned. "Nate." I nearly stopped. My feet locked. But then I heard Jax's voice in my head. "If I tell you to run, you run." My dad's mouth shaping "run." I forced myself forward, tears burning behind my eyes without falling. The tunnel narrowed again, then rose toward a ladder bolted into the wall. Above it, a rusty hatch with daylight leaking around its edges. I climbed, hands slipping on wet metal, heart pounding. I pushed the hatch. It didn't move. Panic surged. I shoved harder. It creaked. A weight pressed down from above, like something was holding it. I froze, listening. Footsteps, right above the hatch. A voice, close. "Stormline exits here," another voice answered. "Check it." The hatch handle rattled as someone grabbed it. My blood went ice. I backed down one rung, pressing myself against the wall in the darkness, phone flashlight off. The hatch lifted a fraction, letting in a blade of daylight. A face appeared in the gap, tactical helmet, eyes scanning down. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. The face lingered. Then, behind it, another voice, calm, unmistakable. Hollis. "You won't find him in the mud," Hollis said, irritated. "He's smarter than that." The helmeted man hesitated. "Sir," Nate said. "Nate is dead," Hollis cut in, tone flat like he was announcing a schedule change. "Stop chasing ghosts. Bring me the mother's location." My vision blurred. Nate. Dead. The helmeted man closed the hatch again with a hard clang, sealing me in the dark. Footsteps moved away. Hollis's voice faded, but his words stayed in my skull like nails. Bring me the mother's location. They weren't just hunting me. They were hunting my family in real time. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn the phone back on. Mom was still on the line, whispering my name over and over like a prayer. "Mom," I whispered, voice raw. "Do not tell anyone where you are. Do you understand?" "What?" she sobbed. Liam, I'm at the car." "Don't say it," I begged. "Please, don't say it." Mom's breathing hitched, confusion and fear mixing. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." I pressed my forehead to the damp concrete. My mind raced. If Hollis couldn't find me here, he'd go for the easiest leverage. Mom, Emma, the hospital, the house. I needed to reach someone who could stop him. But who? The angels were split. Some fighting to save Dad, some maybe part of the trap. The police were a question mark. Nate was dead. And then I remembered the key. Roach had the key. Nate said it opened a locker with a list. Names, payoffs, everyone Hollis owned. That list was the one thing Hollis feared. If I could get that list into the open, into cameras, into public hands, Hollis couldn't just erase us quietly. I needed to find Roach. I needed to get back to the only people who were still moving against Hollis with violence he respected. I climbed back up the ladder, listening until I was sure the footsteps were gone. Then, slowly, I pushed the hatch again. Just a crack. Daylight spilled in, no faces. I opened it wider and pulled myself out. I was behind the old pump house now, an ugly concrete building with peeling paint and warning signs. Beyond it, the dock corridor stretched toward Riverline. I expected to see the SUVs. Instead, I saw smoke. And a line of motorcycles, dozens, racing along the fence road toward the dock, engines screaming like a storm returning. The pack hadn't left. They were coming back, harder, and at the front of them, riding like he wanted to tear the world in half, was Roach. I ran toward him, waving both arms like a lunatic, trying to be seen before someone mistook me for a target. Roach spotted me and slammed his bike sideways, gravel spraying. He jumped off before it even fully stopped and grabbed me by the shoulders. "Kid," he barked, eyes wild, "where the hell have you been?" I opened my mouth, and all the words fought to come out at once, but the only one that mattered came first, cracking out of me like a gunshot. "Nate is dead," I said. "And Hollis is going for my mom." Roach's face went still, dangerously still. He looked past me toward the river road, where black SUVs were already turning back, repositioning, searching again. Then he leaned down until his face was inches from mine. "Do you know what you just became?" he asked, voice low and brutal. I shook my head. Roach's eyes burned. "The trade," he said. He lifted his fist and I saw it, clenched between his knuckles, a brass key with a red tag. "The only thing Hollis can't buy," Roach whispered, "is time." He grabbed my wrist and hauled me toward his bike. "Hold on," he snapped. "We're going to end this before he touches your family." Roach's bike launched so hard my stomach lagged behind my body. I clamped my arms around him, cheek pressed to the back of his vest. The brass key with the red tag was in his fist for a second, then vanished into his jacket like it was a weapon. The pack surged behind us, 40, maybe 50 bikes, filling the river road in a loud, organized wave. Ahead, the dock corridor narrowed again toward Riverline's perimeter, and beyond that, the city's main artery that led back to neighborhoods and hospitals and normal people who didn't know they were standing next to a fire. Roach shouted over his shoulder, "Where's your mom?" I swallowed hard and yelled, "I told her to go to the hospital lobby. She didn't say where she was, but she was leaving the house." Roach's head dipped once, absorbing it. "Good. Hospital has cameras. People. That's friction." "What do you mean?" I shouted. "It means Hollis can't do what he wants in public," Roach barked. "Not clean." We blasted past the old pump house and hit the fence road that ran along Riverline. The gate area ahead still smoked, bent metal, scattered pallets, and a few bikes lying on their sides like wounded animals. Roach didn't slow. He angled off before the main entrance toward a smaller service lane with a sign that read, "Maintenance Access, No Trespassing." "Where are we going?" I yelled. Roach leaned left, taking the lane. "To the locker," he snapped, "before Hollis figures out we still have the key." My heart hammered. Nate's words came back. The list, names, payoffs, everyone Hollis owned. If that list existed, it was the only reason Hollis hadn't already finished Dad and moved on. The maintenance lane led to a squat building with an old public dock entrance, concrete steps, rusted railings, and a row of blue metal lockers bolted to a wall under an awning. It looked like a place fishermen used 20 years ago and forgot. Roach slid the bike sideways and stopped so abruptly my arms almost flew off him. He yanked me down and shoved me behind a concrete pillar. "Stay tight," he ordered. "No hero moves." I nodded, throat too dry to speak. Roach signaled and 6 riders dismounted, spreading out around the dock entrance with the kind of quiet focus that made it scarier than yelling. One took high ground on the steps. Another watched the road. 2 moved toward the locker wall. Roach crouched in front of the lockers, key in hand. His fingers didn't shake. He found a specific locker, number 17, painted so faded you could barely read it. RL17. Of course, he slid the brass key in. It turned with a stiff metallic click. Roach yanked the locker door open. Inside wasn't a pile of cash or drugs or anything dramatic. It was a plastic document pouch taped to the back wall, and a small, flat flash drive sealed in a zip bag. Roach ripped it free and shoved it into his jacket like it was dynamite. Jax's voice crackled from somewhere nearby. He'd finally broken back through the internal chaos. "Roach, you got it?" Roach pressed his mic. "Got it. List is real." A beat of silence on the channel, like even the toughest men in the world had to absorb what that meant. Then Jax. "Where's the kid?" Roach looked at me, then spoke into the mic. "With me. Hollis is hunting his family." Jax's voice turned sharp. "Then we moved the kid to the only place Hollis can't ghost. Bright lights." Roach's jaw clenched. "Hospital." "Jax." "Hospital." My stomach dropped. "My mom is going there," I whispered, and Roach heard me even without the mic. He nodded once. "Then we get there first." A rider on lookout hissed, "Incoming!" Roach's head snapped up. Down the maintenance lane, black SUVs rolled into view. 2, then 4, silent, headlights off until the last second when they flicked on like eyes opening. Men stepped out in tactical vests, weapons low, forming a line, not rushing, cutting off. Roach shoved me lower behind the pillar. "Head down," I obeyed, peeking just enough to see. The suited man from before walked out from the second SUV, not Hollis. The calm voice. He moved like he'd done this in 100 places. He called out, conversational, "Roach, give us the key and the boy. Walk away." Roach stood in the open, hands visible but empty. "You're late," he said, voice loud and flat. The suited man smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter. Hollis gets what he wants." Roach laughed once without humor. "Hollis wants the list." The suited man's smile didn't move, but his eyes tightened. "You don't have it," Roach shrugged. "Sure." The suited man's gaze flicked to the lockers, just once. That was all it took. His voice went colder. "Kill him if you have to. Take the kid alive." My blood turned to ice. Roach didn't retreat. He lifted his chin slightly, and 2 bikes behind him revved at the exact same moment, like a signal flare. Gunfire, cracked, not a spray, not chaos, controlled bursts. The suited man dove behind an SUV door. Tactical guards snapped into cover positions, returning fire. Roach lunged back toward me. "Up!" he barked. He grabbed my backpack and yanked me toward his bike as bullets pinged off concrete and sparked against the locker wall. One of Roach's riders went down near the steps with a sharp grunt, collapsing behind the railing. Another dragged him by the vest, teeth clenched, pulling him out of the line of fire. Roach shoved me onto the seat behind him so hard it knocked the breath out of me. "Hold on like your life depends on it," he snarled, "because it does." He gunned the engine and launched us sideways, not toward the lane entrance where the SUVs blocked, but toward the dock edge. For a split second, I thought he was insane. Then I saw what he saw. A barge tug sitting at the far end of the river channel, and between us and it, an old service ramp sloping down toward the water, used for moving equipment onto boats. Roach aimed for it. Behind us, Jax's group arrived from the fence road like a thunderclap, bikes pouring in, slamming into Hollis's line from the flank. The tactical men didn't expect it. Their formation broke for the first time. Roach hit the ramp at speed. The bike bounced hard. My teeth clacked. We shot down toward the water, spray and mist rising. At the bottom, a small workboat was tied off, just a battered metal skiff with an outboard motor. Two Riverline workers stood frozen beside it, eyes wide. Roach didn't slow. He skidded the bike sideways, jumped off, and shoved the workers back with his forearm. Not hitting them, just clearing space. "Keys!" he barked at them. One worker stammered, "We—" Roach grabbed the man's jacket, yanked him close, and the worker's eyes filled with terror. He fumbled in his pocket and threw a keyring at Roach. Roach caught it, jumped into the skiff, and hauled me after him by the wrist. "Get down!" he ordered, and I dropped into the bottom of the boat, knees to chest. Roach jammed the key, yanked the starter cord. The engine coughed again. My heart stopped. Gunfire cracked overhead, bullets striking water with sharp slaps. Roach yanked the cord again, harder. The engine roared to life. He slammed the throttle and the skiff tore away from the dock, bouncing over choppy water. I dared to look back. On the ramp above, Jax was fighting like a man possessed, holding the line with a handful of riders against the SUVs. Smoke drifted from a damaged engine. The suited man shouted into a radio, face twisted with anger now, real anger. And then, stepping into view behind the SUVs, calm as ever, was Hollis. He stood at the top of the ramp in his pressed shirt, hands at his sides, watching us speed away on the river like we were a minor inconvenience. Even from this distance, I felt his eyes lock onto me. He lifted his hand, not waving, pointing. Then he spoke to the suited man beside him, and the suited man's posture shifted like he'd just received the only order that mattered. Roach glanced back once, saw Hollis, and his face went hard. "We bought seconds," Roach muttered. "Now we use them." He dug into his jacket with one hand and pulled out the flash drive in its zip bag. He held it up like it was a bullet. "This," he said, voice low, "is the only leash Hollis has." "What do we do with it?" I whispered. Roach looked toward the city skyline beyond the river bend, toward the hospital district. "We don't hide it," he said. "We burn it into daylight." The skiff bounced over a wake, spraying cold water into my face. My hands shook so badly I could barely wipe it away. Roach leaned closer, voice rough. "Kid," he said, "you said your mom was heading to the hospital lobby." I nodded. Roach's eyes narrowed. "Then Hollis is heading there too," he said, "and he's not going to walk in wearing a suit." As if to prove him right, a low hum rose behind us, different from engines on water. I turned my head. Upstream, coming fast along the river channel, was another boat, sleek, black, twin engines. It wasn't trying to catch up eventually, it was trying to catch up now, and on its bow I saw a mounted spotlight and the outline of a man braced with a rifle. Roach swore under his breath and shoved the throttle forward. The skiff screamed across the water, but the black boat was faster. And it was closing the gap. The black boat behind us wasn't just faster, it was confident. It stayed centered in the river channel like it owned the water the same way Hollis said he owned the lanes. Twin engines chewed the current and spat out a white wake that clawed toward us. Roach looked back once, eyes narrowing, then leaned forward and pushed the skiff harder. The outboard screamed. The little boat bounced so violently my teeth clacked together again. "Get low," Roach barked. I flattened into the bottom, cheek against cold metal, arms wrapped around my head. The river wind ripped through the open skiff, stinging my eyes. A spotlight snapped on behind us, blinding white that turned the water into a strip of glare. It tracked us, steady like a hand pressing down. Roach swore. "They want us visible." A sharp crack split the air, not an echo, not a warning. A round hitting water close enough that spray splashed into the skiff. I yelped and curled tighter. Roach didn't flinch. He jerked the skiff toward the left bank, aiming for a cluster of old pilings and half-sunk wooden posts that jutted from the river like broken teeth. "They can't follow tight," he muttered. "Too much draft." The skiff cut hard toward the bank. The river shallowed. The outboard's pitch changed, louder and angrier. The black boat stayed on us, but it hesitated just a fraction, slowing, adjusting its angle to avoid the posts. That fraction was a gift. Roach used it, threading the skiff between two pilings so close the wood scraped the side with a grinding squeal. I felt the impact through the hull and braced for us to flip. We didn't. We slid through, wobbling, then shot back into slightly deeper water. The black boat followed the opening we'd used, but it clipped a post, just a kiss, enough to jolt it. The spotlight jerked off us for a heartbeat. Roach glanced back again and grinned with no humor. "Good," he growled. "Bleed speed." Another crack. This one hit closer, too close. Roach shouted something and leaned to the right, pulling the skiff into a weaving pattern. The goal wasn't to outrun the bullets, it was to make aiming hard enough that the shooter would stop wasting shots. But the shooter didn't stop, because they weren't aiming to kill me. They were aiming to stop the boat. A round hit the outboard housing with a metallic clang. Roach cursed and smacked the throttle again. The engine sputtered once. My stomach dropped. "Roach, not dead," he snapped. "Not yet." The skyline ahead sharpened, bridges, cranes, and beyond them, the taller buildings that marked the hospital district. If we could reach a crowded shoreline, somewhere with pedestrians, cameras, traffic, Hollis's people would have to change tactics. Roach shoved the flash drive deeper into his jacket as if it might jump out. "This has to hit daylight," he muttered. A third crack. This time, something slammed into the skiff's side. The metal rang, and water started trickling in through a fresh hole. I stared, frozen, watching a thin stream of river water snake across the floor toward my knees. "We're taking water," I yelled. Roach's eyes flicked down, then forward. "Then we land," he said. He aimed for the nearest concrete service ramp on the left bank, one of those sloped access points used for maintenance crews. Above it was a narrow road, and beyond that, a chain-link fence and a strip of warehouses, not public, not safe. But it was land. We hit the ramp at an angle and the skiff scraped up, hull grinding on concrete. Roach killed the engine and jumped out into ankle-deep water, hauling the bow up with raw strength. "Move," he snapped, grabbing my arm and yanking me out. I stumbled onto the slick ramp, shoes skidding. Behind us, the black boat slowed, keeping distance. The shooter didn't fire. Not now, because this part didn't require bullets. The black boat drifted in, idling near the ramp, and men began stepping onto the bank from a side ladder. 3 of them, fast, trained, weapons low but ready. Roach pulled me toward the top of the ramp, toward the service road. He didn't try to fight them here. He ran like he knew exactly what a firefight on open concrete would cost. We reached the road and cut right, hugging the fence line. Ahead, a chain-link gate stood locked with a thick padlock. Beyond it, the road connected to a main street that would lead toward the hospital district. Roach reached the gate and yanked, locked. He swore, dug into his pocket and pulled a small bolt cutter, compact, heavy. He clamped it on the padlock. "Roach, behind!" I gasped. Footsteps pounded up the ramp. Roach squeezed. The bolt cutters bit. The lock didn't snap. "Cheap lock," Roach growled, adjusting his grip. A voice called out behind us, calm and almost friendly. "Roach, you're tired." Roach didn't turn. He squeezed again. The lock finally cracked. Roach shoved the gate open and hauled me through. We ran onto the main street and froze, because the street wasn't empty. A line of black SUVs was already there, parked across both lanes like a roadblock, doors open, men standing behind them in a neat formation. They hadn't chased us blindly. They'd anticipated where we'd land. Hollis's people were in front of us and behind us. Roach stopped so abruptly I almost slammed into his back. His chest heaved. He looked left, right, no gaps, no side alleys wide enough. Then a new sound rolled in from farther down the road, deep, familiar thunder. Motorcycles, dozens, the pack. They were coming in from the hospital direction, racing toward the blockade like a storm returning to its owner. Roach's face tightened. "Jax," he muttered, like it was both relief and a curse. The tactical men by the SUVs shifted, uneasy now. Their calm faltered the first time they heard that many bikes closing fast. They weren't used to opponents who didn't mind getting hurt. A suited man stepped out from the center SUV, same calm voice as before. He looked directly at Roach, then at me. "Hand over the drive," he called, "and the boy walks." Roach's laugh was rough. "You already tried to take him alive," he shouted back. "What happens after you get him?" The suited man didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. Roach leaned down to me, voice low, urgent. "Kid," he said, "when the bikes hit, it's going to be loud, it's going to be chaos." I swallowed. "Okay." He shoved a hand into his jacket and pulled out the flash drive bag. He pressed it into my palm so hard, it hurt. My eyes widened. "Me?" Roach's face was set like stone. "They want you," he whispered, "not me. So you become the courier." My hands shook. "Where do I take it?" Roach's gaze flicked toward the far end of the street where a sign pointed right, County General Hospital. 1.2 miles. Hospital, he said. Lobby, cameras, people. You find a nurse, a cop, a reporter, anyone with a badge or a phone. You put that drive in their hand and you say one sentence. My throat tightened. What sentence? Roach leaned closer, eyes burning. You say, Riverline Logistics, Hollis. This drive has the list. He paused. Then you don't let go. I stared at the tiny bag in my hand, feeling its weight like a bomb. They'll take me, Roach nodded once, not lying. They'll try. The roar of motorcycles grew, shaking the air. The pack rounded the far corner at speed, jacks at the front, face like a weapon. The tactical line braced, raising weapons, but they didn't fire yet, not with public roads, not with the sound bringing eyes to windows. Cars were stopping now, drivers staring. A man stepped out of a pickup with his phone raised, recording. That was what Roach meant by daylight. Jax's pack hit the blockade like a controlled explosion, bikes skidding sideways to block flanks, riders dismounting and pushing forward behind engine blocks as cover. No wild charge, a practice street takeover. The suited man shouted into a radio, "Now!" Two tactical men broke from the line and sprinted straight toward me. Roach shoved me hard. "Go!" he roared. I ran, not toward the bikes, not toward the SUVs, toward the sidewalk, toward a gap between a stopped sedan and a utility pole. My lungs burned instantly. The flash drive bag was clenched in my fist so tight the plastic crinkled. A hand grabbed at my backpack strap from behind, missed, snagging fabric. I stumbled, caught myself, kept running. I heard Roach's bike rev hard behind me, heard a crash of metal, heard someone scream. I didn't look back. I cut between two parked cars, then onto a side street, narrower, lined with small businesses and a bus stop. People turned and stared. Someone shouted, "Hey!" My phone buzzed in my pocket, Mom calling again. I didn't answer. I couldn't stop. A black SUV turned onto the side street behind me, tires chirping. It wasn't trying to run me over. It was trying to corner me. Ahead was a crosswalk, and beyond it, a small crowd outside a coffee shop, people with cups, jackets, backpacks. Normal life. I sprinted straight toward them, because crowds meant witnesses. The SUV slowed, refusing to plow into civilians. It rolled behind me like a shadow, doors ready. A man stepped into the crosswalk and froze when he saw me running, eyes wide. "Kid!" I didn't slow. I shoved past him, nearly falling. Then another sound hit the street, sirens, real sirens this time, closer, from the hospital direction. The SUV hesitated. A tactical man jumped out anyway, moving fast on foot, weaving through people, eyes locked on me. I bolted into the coffee shop. The bell over the door jingled like the world's stupidest sound. People gasped. A barista dropped a cup. Hot coffee splashed. I skidded behind a table, heart hammering, and screamed the only thing I could think to scream. "Call 911!" I shouted. "Please!" The tactical man stepped into the doorway, scanning, trying to look like anything except what he was. He saw me. He started forward. And then, behind him, another figure entered the shop. Not a biker, not tactical, a police officer, uniform, badge, hand on holster. The tactical man froze for half a second. The officer's eyes narrowed, assessing the scene, the frightened people, the kid behind the table. "What's going on here?" the officer demanded. My throat burned. This was it. This was the moment. I stood up, hands shaking, and held the tiny zip bag out like it was a life preserver. "I have something," I choked. "Riverline Logistics, Hollis, this drive has the list." The officer's gaze snapped to the bag. The tactical man's face tightened, and outside, through the coffee shop window, I saw two more black SUVs roll slowly past the curb like sharks circling. The officer reached for the bag, and the tactical man moved. The officer's hand was halfway to the flash drive when the tactical man moved, not like someone starting a fight, like someone ending one. He lunged forward, shoulder first, slamming into the officer's chest and driving him back into the counter. The officer's elbow hit the espresso machine, metal clanging, customers screaming as hot steam hissed. The flash drive bag flew from my hand and skittered across the tile, spinning under a chair. My heart stopped. The tactical man didn't go for me immediately. He went for the bag. The officer recovered fast, grabbing the man's vest and wrenching him sideways. "Get down!" the officer shouted, to the whole shop and to me, like he was trying to turn panic into order. The tactical man snapped his forearm up and struck the officer's wrist. A sharp crack. The officer grunted, hand slipping from the holster grip. It was silent brutality, right in front of civilians. I dropped behind the table again, crawling on my knees, eyes locked on the chair where the bag had slid. The barista screamed, "Someone call!" Glass rattled as the coffee shop door banged open again. Another officer entered, different uniform, same badge, and the tactical man froze for a heartbeat. But it wasn't relief. It wasn't backup. Because the second officer didn't draw his weapon. He looked at the tactical man and gave the smallest nod, almost invisible. The first officer saw it too. His face tightened. "What the hell are you doing?" he barked. The second officer's eyes flicked to me, then to the floor, then to the tactical man. Calm, professional, owned. My stomach went ice cold. The first officer's voice rose, sharper. "Radio for units, now!" The second officer didn't move. The tactical man used the pause, one clean step, and stomped his boot down on the flash drive bag, pinning it under the chair leg like it was a cigarette butt. Then he bent, grabbed it, and tucked it into his pocket in one motion. "No!" I screamed, and it ripped out of me before I could stop it. The first officer spun toward me. His eyes were furious and confused at once. "Kid, stay down!" The second officer finally spoke, voice controlled. "This is a federal matter," he said, like that sentence was a badge all by itself. The first officer's jaw dropped. "Federal? Your county?" The second officer's hand moved under his jacket, not for a gun, for something else. An ID wallet flashed for half a second, too fast to read. And the tactical man relaxed, not fully, just enough. That told me everything. The uniforms weren't safe, not here. The shop's crowd was pressing backward, people with phones out, filming, whispering, crying. The tactical man's eyes swept them like a calculator. He pointed at the barista. "Turn the cameras off," he said flatly. The barista stared. What?" The second officer stepped closer to the counter and repeated calmly, "Turn them off, now." The barista's hands shook as she reached under the register, fumbling for switches. The first officer shouted, "Don't you touch!" The tactical man hit him, a short, brutal punch to the ribs. The officer folded, air leaving him in a harsh grunt. Before the officer could recover, the tactical man shoved him face first into the counter and pinned him there with an elbow. The second officer looked at the crowd and raised his voice, projecting authority. "Everyone outside, now. This is an active situation." People scrambled, some obeying out of fear, some because the word active made them imagine guns. Phones kept recording anyway. I crawled backward, eyes darting, searching for any path out, back door, restroom, kitchen, anything. The tactical man's head snapped toward me, his gaze locked on my backpack strap like a leash. He took one step. Then the front windows of the coffee shop vibrated with a new sound, deeper than sirens, louder than panic. Motorcycles, not one, many. The tactical man froze. The second officer's expression tightened for the first time. Outside, engines roared up the street like thunder rolling between buildings. People on the sidewalk scattered. Someone shouted, "Oh my!" A bike skidded into view through the glass, sliding sideways to block the lane. Then another, then 5 more. The pack poured in and took the street in seconds, turning the calm little block into a controlled takeover. Jax dismounted in the middle of the road like he owned gravity. His head turned toward the coffee shop window, and his eyes found me through the glass. For one heartbeat, everything inside me unclenched. Then it tightened again, because I saw what Jax saw too. Black SUVs at both ends of the block, doors open, men in tactical vests bracing behind them. This wasn't just Hollis's net, it was a trap built around a crowd. Roach's bike slid in behind Jax, battered, one saddlebag torn, his face streaked with grime. He shouted something I couldn't hear through the glass and pointed at the coffee shop. Jax didn't hesitate. He strode to the front door and yanked it open hard enough the bell rang like a scream. The tactical man inside adjusted his stance instantly, shifting between me and the door. Jax's voice cut through the shop, low and lethal. "Step away from the kid." The tactical man didn't raise his weapon. He didn't need to. He just smiled faintly, like he'd been waiting for this exact frame. "Jax," he said calmly, "you're late." Jax's eyes flicked to the second officer. The second officer's gaze held steady. No fear, no apology. Jax understood. The first officer was still pinned to the counter, struggling for breath. Jax's jaw clenched. "This is your play," he said. The tactical man shrugged. "Hollis doesn't lose," he replied. Roach entered behind Jax, limping slightly, eyes blazing. "Where's the drive?" Roach barked. The tactical man patted his pocket once. "Safe," he said. Roach's shoulders tensed like a dog ready to launch. Jax lifted a hand, stopping him. He took one step inside, slow. The tactical man mirrored him, matching distance. I was crouched behind the table, shaking, watching two adult worlds collide 10 feet from my face. Jax's voice went quieter, almost gentle, but it wasn't for them. It was for me. "Liam," he said without looking away from the tactical man, "get up and walk to me, slowly." I rose, legs trembling so hard I nearly fell. I took one step. The tactical man's hand lifted slightly, warning. Jax stopped moving. The tactical man spoke, calm as ever. "Kid stays. You and Roach walk out. We leave. Nobody dies." Roach snarled. "You already killed Nate." The tactical man didn't blink. "Nate chose wrong," he said. My stomach twisted. Nate's face flashed in my mind. Pale, scared, determined. Jax's eyes hardened. "You don't get to say that like it's weather." The second officer finally drew his weapon, not pointing it at Jax, pointing it at the civilians who hadn't fled fast enough. He shouted, "Outside, now!" Jax held his ground. Roach did too. The tactical man's gaze flicked to me again, measuring the distance, the angle, the fastest way to grab. Jax said one word into his mic, so low it was almost swallowed. "Blue." Roach's head turned a fraction, like he knew exactly what that meant. Outside, the motorcycle engines changed tone, rising, then dropping, like a coordinated breath. And then the coffee shop's lights went out, not flickering, dead. A sudden blackout that swallowed the room. People screamed. Someone knocked over a chair. The espresso machine hissed. In the darkness, I felt Jax's hand grab my wrist, firm, sure, and yank me toward him. "Move," he growled in my ear. We stumbled toward the door, but at the same instant, a heavy body slammed into us from the side. The tactical man. He'd timed it. He grabbed for my backpack strap, wrenching me backward. I screamed, twisting, trying to rip free, but his grip was iron. Roach hit him, not with a fist, with the entire weight of his body. They crashed into the table, splintering wood, knocking me sideways. I hit the floor hard, air exploding from my lungs. In the chaos, something small and hard skittered across the tile, dropped from the tactical man's pocket. The flash drive bag. It had fallen. I saw it in the darkness because my phone screen lit up in my hand. Mom still on the call, the glow faint but enough. I lunged. My fingers closed on the plastic. Jax shouted, "Liam!" I scrambled, clutching the drive, crawling toward the door where daylight leaked in from outside. Roach and the tactical man grappled, crashing into chairs, grunting, cursing. A gunshot cracked inside the coffee shop. I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the drive again. Someone screamed. Jax grabbed me by the back of my jacket and hauled me upright, dragging me through the door into the street. The world outside was chaos. Bikes blocking lanes, people filming, black SUVs repositioning, men shouting into radios. Jax shoved me behind the bulk of a parked motorcycle, using it as cover. "Do you have it?" he demanded, eyes wild. I held up the flash drive bag with shaking fingers. Jax's face tightened with fierce relief. "Good," he snapped. "Now we end this." Roach stumbled out of the coffee shop a second later, breathing hard, one hand bleeding, the other empty. "There are guys still inside," he growled, "and the uniforms aren't clean." Jax nodded once, brutal focus locking in. He leaned down to me, voice low and deadly steady. "Liam," he said, "your mom is at the hospital. Hollis is going there next." My throat seized. "How do you know?" Jax's eyes flicked to the flash drive in my hand. "Because this is the only thing that can stop him," he said, "and you're the only thing he can trade for it." He grabbed my helmet strap, tightened it, then pointed down the street toward the wailing sirens and the tall white building visible between blocks. "Get on," he said. "We ride straight into the lobby." And as we mounted the bike, engines rising around us like a wall, I looked back once and saw Hollis step out from behind an SUV at the end of the block, calm as ever, phone to his ear, watching me like he'd already decided how this ended. Jax launched us toward the hospital like the street belonged to him. The pack didn't follow as one blob. It formed a moving shield, bikes fanning ahead to clear intersections, others dropping back to block the black SUVs that tried to slide in behind us. It was controlled violence, the kind that didn't look like chaos until you realized every piece had a job. Sirens wailed from somewhere close, ambulances, patrol cars, maybe both. The city's normal emergency noise mixed with the growl of engines until it felt like the whole world was panicking. I clutched the flash drive bag inside my jacket like it could stop a bullet. "Where's the lobby?" Jack shouted over his shoulder. "Front entrance," I yelled back. "Big glass doors." Jax nodded once and leaned forward, pushing speed through traffic gaps that made my stomach twist. Cars scattered, people stared, phones rose. We cleared the last intersection and the hospital rose ahead. White, bright, too clean. County General, huge letters above a multi-lane drop-off loop, and the loop was full. Families, nurses, security guards, patients in wheelchairs, a food delivery guy with bags, real people with real faces who had no idea what was coming. Jax didn't roar straight into the crowd. He slowed just enough to thread the bike into the curb lane, then stopped hard near the glass doors. Roach slid in behind us with 3 riders, dismounting fast, scanning the whole entrance like it was a battlefield. Jax yanked me down and planted himself between me and the street. "Helmet stays," he snapped. "Drive stays in your hand. You do not let go." I nodded, throat tight. Inside the lobby, fluorescent lights buzzed. A security desk sat 10 feet in, with 2 guards watching the entrance. One of them reached for his radio the moment he saw the vests and the bikes. Jax raised a hand, palm out, not threatening, just commanding. "Nobody gets hurt," he said loudly, for everyone to hear. "We need 5 minutes." People froze mid-step. A woman clutching a child backed away. A nurse's eyes widened. Roach pushed in beside Jax, voice low but carrying. "Where's the nearest police substation?" he demanded at the security desk. The guard swallowed. "Sir, you can't," Jax cut in, calm and loud. "Call a supervisor. Call an officer. Call whoever you call when you don't want a scandal." The guard hesitated, then grabbed his phone with shaking fingers. Jax turned to me and pointed at the security desk, like it was the only safe object in the building. "You," he said. "You give it to the highest-ranking badge you see. Not a random uniform, not someone who won't say their name." My hand trembled around the flash drive. "What if they take me?" I whispered. Jax's eyes stayed hard. "They'll try," he said. "That's why we do this in front of witnesses." Roach leaned toward my ear. "Hollis can buy shadows," he muttered. "Not a lobby full of cameras." At the far end of the lobby, the elevator doors opened. A man stepped out, not tactical, not in a suit, hospital scrubs, surgical cap in his hand, ID badge clipped to his pocket. For half a second, relief flared in me, because he looked normal. Then I saw his shoes, not hospital shoes, polished, and the way he scanned the lobby, left, right, exits, like a map. Roach's head turned a fraction. "That's not a doctor," he murmured. Jax's posture shifted, subtle, like a dog smelling smoke. The man in scrubs walked toward the desk with calm steps. His eyes landed on me for a beat too long, then slid away like he didn't care. But he did. He was measuring distance. Jax stepped slightly in front of me. "Don't move," he murmured. The man in scrubs reached the security desk and smiled at the guard. "I'm here for a patient transfer," he said, voice smooth. The guard's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. "Sir, The man in scrubs leaned in slightly, and I saw a flash under his sleeve, a tattoo line, black ink, military style. My stomach dropped. Jax's voice snapped. "Hey!" The man in scrubs didn't look up. "Not your business," he said, still smiling at the guard. Jax took one step closer. "It is when you look at the kid like that." The man in scrubs finally turned his head and met Jax's eyes. No surprise, no fear, just a faint, irritated calm. "Jax," he said softly, like they'd met before. Roach growled. "That's Hollis's inside." The man in scrubs shrugged. "Everyone's inside," he replied, and then his right hand moved, fast, toward his waistband. Jax moved faster. He slammed the man into the security desk so hard the plexiglass rattled. The guard yelped and stumbled back. The lobby erupted. People screamed. Someone dropped a drink. A wheelchair rolled uncontrolled until it hit a wall. Roach grabbed my shoulder and shoved me behind the security desk. "Stay down," he barked. I crouched, clutching the drive, heart punching my ribs. The man in scrubs twisted against Jax, trying to draw something. Jax pinned his arm. Then a voice rang out from the hospital entrance behind us, clear, loud, carrying authority. "Everyone freeze!" A uniformed police officer stood in the doorway, weapon drawn, eyes wide at the scene. Bikers, guards, civilians panic. Behind him, 2 more officers entered. For one heartbeat, I thought, finally. Then I saw the second officer's gaze. Not on Jax, not on the man in scrubs, on me, on my hand, on the flash drive. Roach saw it too. His face went cold. Jax held the man in scrubs pinned and looked at the officers. "We're not here to hurt anyone," he said, loud and steady. "We have evidence of corruption. This child needs protection." The lead officer's jaw clenched. "Put your hands up," he barked. "Now." Roach muttered under his breath, "He's bought." The lead officer stepped forward, weapon trained, voice sharp. "Kid, come here." My throat seized. I didn't move. The man in scrubs, pinned, smiled faintly like he just watched the last domino fall into place. He spoke quietly, just loud enough for Jax to hear. "Hollis says hello," he murmured. Jax's eyes flicked to me. "Liam," he said, still controlling the man with one hand. "Look at the badges. Read the names." My mind raced. I stared at the lead officer's chest. Nameplate, Henderson. The second officer, Blake. The third, Martin. I didn't know any of them. That meant nothing until it meant everything. Because the officer named Blake didn't look nervous. He looked impatient, like he wanted this over. Roach leaned toward me, voice like a growl. "Not Henderson," he whispered. "Not Blake. Find someone else, a supervisor, a camera, a reporter." My eyes darted around. Behind the reception area, a woman in a blazer stood frozen, hospital admin phone raised, recording. And near the elevators, a man with a press badge clipped to his jacket, local news maybe, staring like he'd just found the story of his life. My breath hitched. I slid out from behind the desk, moving low, using the desk as cover, edging toward the admin woman's line of sight. "Kid!" Officer Henderson barked. "Stop!" Jax's voice cut through, loud. "This is a child. Back off." Officer Blake stepped left, trying to angle around the desk to cut me off. Roach moved with him, blocking the angle with his body, hands out like he was trying to keep peace, while his posture screamed violence. "Easy," Roach said, loud. "Don't touch the kid." Blake's eyes flicked to Roach's vest. "Move," he hissed. Roach didn't. In the lobby's glass reflection, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. Outside, across the drop-off loop, a black SUV had rolled into the ambulance lane and stopped. No lights, no siren. The back door opened. Hollis stepped out, not hiding, not rushing, just walking toward the entrance in his pressed shirt like he was late for a meeting. People saw him and didn't recognize him, but they felt something shift. The air thinned. Hollis entered the lobby. He didn't look at Jax. He didn't look at Roach. He looked straight at me. And he smiled like he'd already paid for this moment. Officer Henderson's weapon stayed up, but his eyes flicked to Hollis for a split second, like checking for approval. That was the answer I didn't want. Hollis stopped 10 feet from the security desk, hands relaxed at his sides, voice calm enough to make it worse. "Liam," he said, saying my name like we were family. "You've had a long day." My skin crawled. I backed up instinctively, bumping into the desk. Hollis's eyes softened just a fraction. "Your mother and sister are safe," he said. "They're being helped. All you need to do is give me what you're holding." My breath caught. "Where are they?" I choked. Hollis's smile didn't fade. "Not here," he said. "Somewhere quiet." Roach's voice cracked with rage. "You touch them, I'll—" Hollis turned his head slightly toward Roach, still calm. "You won't," he said, "because you care about the boy more than you care about winning." His eyes returned to me. "Hand it to me," he said, "and I let your father walk. I let your mother keep breathing. I let your sister sleep tonight." My hand shook around the flash drive bag. Behind Hollis, Officer Blake took one step closer, weapon low now, like the decision had already been made. Jax's voice went tight. "Liam, don't." Hollis's tone stayed gentle. "This isn't about you and them," he said to me. "This is about your family." My brain screamed that he was lying, but then Hollis lifted his phone and tapped the screen once. He turned it so I could see. a live video feed. My mom in a hospital stairwell, holding Emma tight, both of them crying. A man's gloved hand visible in the frame, gripping Mom's shoulder. Mom's face turned toward the camera, and even through the shaky feed, I saw her mouth my name. Liam. My blood went cold and hot at the same time. Hollis lowered the phone and looked at me kindly, like he was offering a solution to a math problem. Trade, he said. My fingers went numb, and in that exact second, from deeper inside the hospital, an alarm began to blare, high, urgent, followed by a shouted announcement over the PA. Code Silver, active threat. The lobby froze. Even Hollis's smile faltered for half a beat. Because Code Silver meant one thing in a hospital. Someone inside had finally understood what was happening, and now the building itself was screaming it. The Code Silver alarm didn't just make noise, it rewrote the room. People who'd been frozen started moving with purpose. Nurses snapping into motion, security guards stepping out from behind the desk, civilians being pushed back toward hallways with doors that could lock. A woman in scrubs grabbed a child and yanked him behind a column. Phones rose higher, recording everything now because the building itself had just announced an active threat. Hollis's smile returned, smaller and sharper. That's inconvenient, he murmured, like the hospital had interrupted his schedule. Officer Henderson's radio squawked. His eyes flicked between Hollis and the exits. We need to secure the lobby, he barked, but his voice lacked real authority now, because everyone could see he was looking for direction. Jack still had the man in scrubs pinned to the desk, but his focus was on me. Liam, he said, low and urgent, listen to me. That video could be old. It could be a loop. Don't give him the drive. Hollis didn't argue. He just raised his phone again and tapped once more. The feed shifted. Different angle, closer. My mom's face filled the screen. Emma's rabbit was visible, crushed against her chest. Emma was shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Mom spoke, but I couldn't hear her. I could read it on her mouth anyway. Please. My knees felt like they were going to fold. Roach's face was pure rage, but even he didn't move, because Hollis had done what he always did. He'd put innocence on the table like chips. Trade, Hollis repeated, voice calm. The drive for your family. You can be the hero you wanted to be this morning. I looked down at the zip bag in my hand, a tiny thing, a cheap piece of plastic, and inside it, Nate's last chance, Roach's risk, Jax's war, a list of names that could burn a city. I thought about Dad's note, don't touch the bike, ever. He'd been trying to protect us from this exact moment. The Code Silver alarm kept wailing. The lobby doors were being locked from the inside now, magnetic clicks, metal clanks. A nurse slapped a sign onto the sliding doors, lockdown. That mattered. Because Hollis hadn't planned a lockdown, Hollis had planned a quiet trade. Henderson's radio crackled again. Units en route, the dispatcher voice said. Maintain perimeter? Hollis's eyes flicked toward the entrance, a tiny crack in his composure. He didn't like extra variables. Roach leaned close to me, voice like gravel. Kid, he whispered, if you hand it to him, he kills your dad anyway. Then he kills us. Then he kills your mom later when she's no longer useful. My throat burned. Then what do? I whispered back. Roach's eyes hardened. You make him trade in public, he said, for real. Jax's gaze snapped to Roach, then back to me, understanding landing at the same time. Hollis watched the micro-movements. He wasn't stupid. He lifted his phone again and took one slow step closer. Liam, he said gently, don't make this hard. I raised my hand. Hollis's eyes brightened, just a fraction. I walked forward, slow, shaking, like a kid being pushed toward a cliff. Officer Blake shifted, ready, eyes locked on my fist. Hollis extended his hand. And I did exactly what Roach told me to do. I made it public. I stopped 2 steps short of Hollis, turned slightly, just enough so the admin woman in the blazer and the man with the press badge could see my hand clearly, and I lifted the flash drive bag high. This is evidence, I said, voice cracking but loud in the screaming alarm. Riverline Logistics, Hollis, this has the list. The press guy's eyes widened. His phone rose instantly, recording. The admin woman whispered, "Oh my God," and kept filming. Hollis's smile froze. "Give it to me," he said, tone tightening. I looked at his phone. "Show them," I said louder. "Show everyone, my mom and sister." For the first time, Hollis hesitated. Because he could control a hallway, he could control a cop, but he couldn't control 100 witnesses and a reporter when the building was locked down and already shouting Code Silver. Roach took a step forward, hands out, voice booming. "You want to trade? Do it clean, in front of the cameras. Release them on screen, now." Officer Henderson's face tightened. He didn't like being on camera. None of them did. Hollis's eyes flicked to Henderson, then to Blake, checking his assets. Then his gaze returned to me. And for the first time that day, I saw it clearly. He wasn't deciding whether to spare my family. He was deciding what would cost him less. He lifted his phone, tapped the screen, and put it on speaker. "Bring them to the lobby stairwell," he said calmly. "Now." Jax's head snapped up. "Don't," he warned, but it was too late. The command had left Hollis's mouth. A minute later, the side doors near the stairwell burst open, and my mom stumbled into the lobby, Emma clinging to her like a life jacket. 2 men in tactical vests were behind them, hands on Mom's shoulders, weapons low. The lobby erupted in screams and shouts. Security guards moved. Nurses shouted for people to get back. Phones went everywhere. Mom's eyes found me. She made a sound that was half sob, half prayer. "Liam!" she cried. Emma saw me and broke free for half a second, trying to run, but one of the men yanked her back gently, not cruel, just controlled. Roach's voice thundered, "Hands off the kid's family." Hollis raised a hand, still calm, like a conductor. "Nobody needs to get hurt," he said. "Liam, give me the drive." I looked at Mom. She shook her head violently, tears streaming. "No," she mouthed. "No." Dad's voice wasn't here, but I heard it anyway. "Run." And then I remembered something else Dad had mouthed earlier. They're not who they say they are. They were cops. They were guards. They were federal. They were suits. They were whatever Hollis needed. But cameras didn't care who you claimed to be. Cameras cared what you did. I made my choice. I turned and shoved the flash drive bag into the press guy's hands. "Don't give it back," I yelled, voice tearing. "Upload it." The press guy's eyes went huge. He clutched it like it was radioactive. Hollis's face changed instantly, real anger, the mask cracking. "Take it," he snapped. Officer Blake lunged toward the press guy. Roach moved like a cannon. He slammed into Blake, knocking him sideways into a column. Blake's gun clattered across the tile. Henderson shouted, chaos exploding. Jax released the man in scrubs and sprinted toward Mom and Emma, grabbing the nearest tactical man by the vest and driving him backward into the wall with a brutal shove. Security guards, real hospital security, finally acted. They piled in, not knowing who was who, just responding to the alarm and the visible threat. The lobby became a storm of bodies and shouting and flashing screens. In the middle of it, Hollis did what Hollis always did. He tried to leave. He turned toward the exit doors, reaching into his pocket for his phone again, probably to order another move, another corridor, another shadow. But the doors were locked. Magnetic lockdown. He yanked once, twice, nothing. For the first time, Hollis looked trapped by something he didn't own. Sirens wailed louder outside, real patrol cars arriving in force now, drawn by the hospital's code silver, by the crowd, by the live streams that were already going up. The press guy backed away from Blake, clutching the drive, shouting into his phone. "I have it! Yes! Upload now!" Hollis's eyes snapped to him, and in that look was the promise of revenge. Roach saw it too. He stepped between Hollis and the press guy like a wall. "You touch him," Roach said, voice quiet and deadly, "and your whole empire burns in daylight." Hollis stared at him. Then, slowly, Hollis's eyes shifted to me, small kid in a helmet, shaking, standing between my mom and my sister. And for the first time, Hollis looked at me like I wasn't leverage. He looked at me like I was a problem. Mom grabbed me and pulled me into her arms so hard it hurt. Emma wrapped around my waist, crying. Rabbit crushed between us. I was breathing, but it didn't feel real. The lobby doors finally unlocked as uniformed officers poured in, more than 3, more than 5. Enough that Henderson and Blake couldn't steer the room anymore. Body cams everywhere, voices calling names, supervisors arriving, taking control. Hollis tried to speak, smooth, confident, but a woman lieutenant cut him off, loud and clear. "Hands where I can see them," she ordered. "Now." For the first time, Hollis didn't have a script. He raised his hands, not because he'd changed, because he'd been caught in a room full of witnesses, cameras, and a drive that was already leaving his control. Jack stood near us, chest heaving, eyes scanning for threats that might still come. Roach leaned against a column, bleeding, laughing once under his breath like he couldn't believe the day had finally turned. I looked up at Mom. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were fierce. "You did not do this alone," she whispered. I wanted to tell her I had, that I'd sold Dad's Harley, that I'd started the chain. But then I saw Dad in my mind, bruised, bound, mouthing "run," not to save himself, but to save me. And I understood the last rule of that adult world. Sometimes the only way out is to drag the truth into the light so hard it can't be stuffed back into the dark. The hospital alarm finally cut off. The sudden quiet was so sharp it made my ears ring. In it, I heard a small sound I'd been waiting for all day. A phone ringing. Jax answered his. His face shifted as he listened. Then he looked at me and said quietly, "They found Daniel." Mom's breath caught. Jax nodded once. "Alive," he said. "On a secondary Riverline site. The drive lit up routes. They couldn't hide him anymore." Mom's knees nearly buckled. Roach caught her by the elbow without thinking. Outside, sirens continued, but now they sounded different. Not chasing, not hunting, arriving, closing in. I held Emma tighter and stared at the glass doors where Hollis stood in handcuffs, still trying to look calm as cameras pointed at him. He met my eyes one last time. No smile now, just a cold promise. And I realized something else. Even with Hollis caught, even with the list in daylight, even with my family breathing, I would never hear a motorcycle engine the same way again.